the world didn't end with a bang. It glitched out. Monsters from a game invaded reality and wiped out humanity like it was a failed beta test. But when everything collapsed, time rolled back to the first login screen. Now he's the only one who remembers the apocalypse, and this time, he's not grinding to survive. With the Soul Reaper class, he doesn't need allies. He'll create them himself. He's summoning an army to break the system before it breaks the world. The apocalypse already won once, not again. Let's go. Right now, in the game Immortal World, there was a chase going on in the rocky desert. The girls were running from 3-level ghost wolves of the desert, trying to break away from them, but they were unable to do so. The cleric exclaimed that they were so unlucky. They had just been on the first level of the Sand Scorpion. How did they stumble upon these wolves? She turned to the leader, a warrior of their squad, asking what they should do. She pointed ahead and said that they needed to hold out a little longer. There were sandalwood trees ahead. The ghost wolves wouldn't climb them, so they could take cover in the branches. After that, she gritted her teeth and thought that the wolves were very cruel. If they saw a target, they would pursue it to the last. In the last battle, they suffered greatly, and the last 2 pieces of their black metal equipment broke. Are they really going to die like this? At that moment, a member of their team, a mage named Xiaohe, fell, and the girls immediately turned to look at her. Seeing the wolves attacking her, they called out worriedly and warned her of the danger, but the girl would have been too late to do anything. Luckily, someone saved them, and the sword pierced the wolf, preventing it from attacking the girl. Then the wielder of this weapon, the protagonist Lin Yuan, appeared. Xiaohe looked at him in surprise and wondered, was it he who saved her? Seeing that he was a first-level mage, she was very surprised and exclaimed, "So he's a newbie?" Yuan removed his hood and cast a confident glance at the wolves, saying that 3rd-level monsters weren't that strong. The beasts rushed to attack. He grabbed his sword and ran towards them, and when they pounced on him in a jump, he made several swings with the sword, finishing off each wolf with a single blow. The girls were shocked by the sight. He had killed 4 ghost wolves with a simple sword. Then, Xiaohe noticed something. She pointed at the wolves that had just arrived. There was now a whole pack of them. The cleric nervously exclaimed, "When did they even appear here?" The mage replied that perhaps these ghost wolves were nearby and had smelled the blood of their dead kin. The warrior called out to Yuan and told him to run, for that pack could destroy an entire village. She wasn't joking. They would simply tear him apart. He glanced at her with a smirk, then opened the system, and it presented him with several cards, asking if he wished to summon skeleton warriors. He confirmed this, then waved his hand, and as soon as the cards touched the ground, a huge magic circle appeared, after which 3rd-level skeleton warriors emerged from the sand. The wolves weren't afraid and rushed into battle. And then MC said with a grin that they'd see who could tear each other apart. The skeletons ran towards the wolf pack, and Yuan joined the fray and began fighting shoulder to shoulder with his loyal warriors. After 15 minutes, this huge pack was finished. For killing 16 wolves, he received 160 experience points and a couple of items, their teeth, skins, and claws. He quickly collected the items, and the girls, who had been watching him from behind cover the whole time, asked in surprise, "Did he kill them all alone?" Xiaohe approached him and asked, "Is he a mage? Did he just use a summoning skill?" She was also a mage, but she had never seen such a skill. He told her she was mistaken, and she asked with interest, "Who is he then?" He chose not to say this and only smirked. He has a forbidden class of the SSS rank, Soul Reaper. His name is Lin Yuan. He comes from the Blue Planet, and he is a reincarnated person. 3 years ago, scientists discovered a huge, mysterious magical planet that suddenly formed behind the Blue Planet. And 3 months ago, a mysterious company announced the launch of a virtual game called Immortal World, shocking the entire world. After everyone put on special virtual reality glasses and entered the game, they were divided into 4 classes. As they leveled up, they gained the ability to fight monsters in the game. At first, no one was worried, because it was just a game. But one day, some of the players gained gaming skills in the real world and were nicknamed the Chosen Ones. Since then, a bunch of cultists who called themselves followers of the evil star god came into the real world from the virtual one and began killing people. This tragedy took the lives of his parents. People united the entire planet and fought against the cultists, but in the end, they were defeated. Yuan died in the last battle, but he never expected that an hour later he would be reborn at the time when he first logged into the game. At that moment, the system gave him a forbidden class. This time, he must level up his strength and skills even faster and protect the Blue Planet and his family. Now it was time to collect souls from the wolves. As soon as he touched one, energy began to flow from the bodies of all the monsters, and the system asked if he wished to summon the ghostly wolves of the desert. He agreed, and the wolves immediately rose from the dead. His class trait gives him the strength of a warrior, while still being able to use dark summoning, turning bodies into zombies that will protect him. These monsters not only retain their previous levels and skills, but also acquire a new immortality skill, making them immune to the most harmful effects. And his talent, Poison Gate, can revive a monster using dark summoning and, along with its level, increase the capacity of its soul storage. So, at a high enough level, he'll assemble an invincible army of death. Seeing the zombie, the squad leader became wary and asked who he was, but MC ignored her and looked to the sky, saying he should be here by now. A system notification appeared above them. The world boss, the giant death wolf, was heading for the rocky desert. Yuan grinned, anticipating another fight, while lightning flashed in the sky and the others hid. As soon as a rift formed in the sky, they exclaimed in horror that the giant death wolf was here. The game's official website stated that its attack range was 50 meters, so they should run away before it was too late. All the players immediately began to scatter, but the giant wolf quickly got them, and those who survived were left terrified by the sight. The giant death wolf is level 6 and has 2 skills, so it's a formidable opponent. The player whose friend was killed by the wolf rushed to attack, but the others held him back and exclaimed, "Have you lost your mind? The giant death wolf can't be killed alone. He will simply die." Another player, hiding behind some rocks, asked, "Is this a world boss? Can it even be killed?" His friend noticed something. A guy was openly walking toward the wolf with a confident look. The guy immediately noticed his meager equipment and said he was a newbie. The giant death wolf is a level 6 world boss lord. Even all of them together wouldn't be able to leave a scratch on it. In Immortal World, monsters are classified in order from weakest to strongest. Normal and elite ranks, boss ranks, lord ranks, king ranks, overlord ranks, and tyrant ranks. A world boss, even a level 1 monster, is extremely dangerous for newbies. MC confidently approached the monster, and the guys began to worry about it, but they didn't know how high its rank was. He ignored the guys and told the world boss that he looked at him now and really was nothing. These words angered the wolf, who immediately activated his howl skill and attacked him with a sound wave, and he jumped aside. Immediately after, the wolf pounced on him, activating the Deathclaw skill, and then Yuan concentrated. From his past life, he remembers that a level 6 giant death wolf with this skill had 3,400 health points and 510 attack. For travelers of the rocky desert, the highest among whom was only level 3, defeating such an opponent alone was extremely difficult. Back then, he almost died fighting against him in a team, but now he has been reborn, participated in countless battles, so he is no longer what he was before. When the monster's paw appeared right above him, he quickly dodged to the side, and the wolf slammed the ground. Seeing that he dodged, he immediately turned around, and one of the players remarked on his astonishing speed. Suddenly, the monster's eyes lit up. It went into a rage mode, and MC smiled as if it was just what he was expecting. After that, he touched the ground, summoning the gates of hell, and told his warriors to rise. As soon as the gates opened, he gave the order, and his army of wolves rushed out of the portal. One of the players remarked in surprise that it was something otherworldly. Could those really be zombies? They look like wolves in the desert. But how did he manage to turn so many monsters into zombies? Yuan joined his wolves, and thought that he had reached level 3 by destroying the monsters on the way here. The gate's storage capacity had increased to 30. He was a little late, but level 3 was worth it. According to the aggressive immortality mechanism, if the caster is stronger than the monsters they summoned, and they act together, the monster will kill the caster first. And while the summoned monsters are attacking, the boss will not change targets. The giant wolf began swinging its paw, scattering its opponents, and when one of the wolves howled loudly, the monster immediately pounced. MC realized that now was the perfect moment. He uses an aggressive mechanism when the boss starts attacking the summoned monsters and prevents its attack. He rushed forward and swung his sword several times, causing the monster to suffer large cuts, causing it to scream loudly in pain. After that, the giant wolf targeted him, and he thought that when the boss attacks the caster, he should attack it again, using summoned monsters to evade its aggression. 1,000 ants will kill even an elephant. Even if each zombie only deals 15 points of damage, the giant wolf's 3,400 points of health will eventually run out. The wolves surrounded the enemy, which made him nervous, and then Yuan pounced on him, and one of the players said that this was incredible. This is a world boss lord. They did not notice how some players sneaked up on them with clearly ill intentions. A few minutes passed, the boss's health dropped to 500, and MC pounced on him, dealing a critical hit that immediately reduced his health to 10. The giant wolf howled loudly in pain before falling to the ground, and Yuan approached it. The system informed him that the enemy was now on the verge of death. Just as he was about to deliver the finishing blow, those same players pounced on him to take his loot for themselves. MC gave them a displeased look, and the honest players warned him of the danger, and he immediately turned around and swung his sword, quickly finishing them off. He glanced at their bodies and told them not to overestimate themselves, and the guys stared at him in shock. He had just killed the 3rd-level bandits with one blow. By this time, the wolf had gathered his strength and was able to rise, but another attack immediately awaited him. Yuan dealt the monster a critical hit, and the system informed him that the world boss had died, rewarding him with 480 experience points and a soul stone. He became curious about what would drop from his body, and a soul stone appeared before him. By collecting enough of these stones, he could go to the Immortal Council to exchange them for legendary equipment. Upon reaching level 60, players are sent to the Immortal Council, where elves live and continue to level up, so now is too early for this. However, obtaining legendary equipment with this stone is very easy. Immortal level equipment is divided into weak and powerful, simple equipment, equipment made of black metal, bronze, silver, gold, and dark gold. There is epic, legendary, and fantastical equipment. Beginners have the most basic equipment, and few manage to obtain equipment made of black metal. 2 hours ago, he subjugated 2 skeletal warriors to lure an elite-level sand lizard to his side. There, he received the bronze equipment guarded by the warriors, the sand lizard mantle. The system now informed him that he was the first player to defeat the world boss, earning him the title Monster Hunter. When the title was activated, his attack power, critical strike chance, and spell damage were increased by 10%. He looked thoughtfully at the system window and thought that in the game, titles could grant players various stats or special status. The bonus effect of the Monster Hunter title was very useful. Since he was the first player to defeat the world boss, he received an additional reward, a chest containing silver armor. Upon opening it, the Silver Moon Sword appeared in his inventory, granting 100 attack power and 10 agility. Death's Eye, an accessory that grants 40 intelligence, also has an additional skill that increases the user's attack speed and deals additional damage with oxidizing rays. A recovery potion that instantly restores 20% of health and mana, a level 1 skill scroll that increases skill effectiveness by 100 points, and Monster Essence, which can only be obtained by killing strong enemies. This essence allows you to create potions and can be ingested. It also increases strength, physical ability, agility, and intelligence by 10 points. He was very happy with this reward. For the first boss, it was quite generous. The system informed him that the experience points had been calculated and the player's information had been updated. He immediately felt a surge of strength. His level had risen to 4th, and he also received experience points. When you level up, you gain 5 skill points, 3 intelligence points, and 2 strength points, thus increasing his stats slightly. Glancing at his status window, he thought, this is excellent. Now he has the strongest stats of all the players in the Rocky Desert. Moreover, even though he sacrificed all the zombie wolves, he leveled up and the gates of hell were upgraded. Now he could hold 40 souls there. He reached out to the giant wolf, using his power on it, and the system offered to summon it. He agreed, and the wolf's eyes immediately opened. It stood up and growled softly. Now it was one of his undead warriors. The wolf now had 4 skills. Wail of the Vicious Wolf deals 40% increased damage to enemies and stuns them for 5 seconds. Beast Heart increases health by 400%. Deathclaw increases attack power by 150, and Rage of the Risen increases allies' attack by 10% and critical strike chance by 20. Yuan thought that, as expected from a world boss, he had an amazing area damage skill and outstanding crowd control abilities. Unlike other Ryzen, after becoming a zombie, he gained the skill Rage of the Ryzen. With the help of the giant death wolf, he will be able to instantly summon zombies from hell. He drove the wolf into the gate, and the other players, watching the spectacle, said that it was so scary. Did he really turn the world boss into a zombie? And what is this strange portal? Those zombie wolves definitely came out of there. Hearing their whispers, MC turned around, and the players immediately hid behind the rocks, afraid to catch his eye. He thought they had long since scattered, but all this time they were watching his fight. Also, after killing 3 bandits, he received a sword of black metal, a good weapon for low-level players, but he already had the Silver Moon Sword. Taking the sword, he headed to their hiding place, and the players became nervous. They were already thinking of running away, but MC approached them and asked, were they screaming? The guy he addressed was too scared to speak, so he simply thrust the sword into his hands, surprising him. Afterwards, he left, saying that it might be useful, and the other players crowded around the guy, asking in surprise, did he come to give him the sword? It was a black metal sword, worth a fortune. 10 minutes passed, and Yuan felt a strange sensation, and then everything went dark before his eyes. It turned out he had been transported back to reality. Taking off his VR glasses, he sighed. It turned out the battery had died, and he returned. He thought that now he needed to quickly earn money and buy a console. Immortal World is a hyper-realistic holographic game with different zones depending on the player's country. Moreover, each zone has different worlds available to choose from. For example, Elpad has 4 countries: the Western Empire of the Ancient Desert, the Southern and Northern Empires, and a tidal island. In this life, he didn't change his choice when he first logged into the game. He chose the Western Empire of the Ancient Desert because before his death, he learned a secret. On the day when monsters poured into the city from the portal and he lay crippled under the rubble, he saw something strange. Strange people rose in the sky, wearing a yellow sapphire on their clothes. the emblem of the Guild of the Western Empire of the Ancient Desert. In fact, the first follower of the Devil's Star was a human. He remembers that the first follower is a key figure in the final summoning of the evil overlord to the Blue Star. There are still 3 years left until the summoning. If he destroys him during this time, he might be able to prevent the tragedy. The only clue is the emblem. Only the guilds of the main city in the ancient desert decorate their signs with a yellow sapphire, and one can only enter the city after reaching level 10. If he wants to uncover this rat's true identity, he needs to level up quickly. An idea occurred to him. He tried using the same skills he used in the game, and he managed to summon a skeleton summon card. It was currently in his hand. Some Immortal World players transfer their skills from the game into the real world, and these people are called the Chosen Ones, also known as Children of Fate. Each Chosen One is endowed with a powerful hidden destiny and immense luck. The Chosen Ones are the main force in opposing the evil overlord. In his past life, his in-game skills transferred to real life only when a catastrophe struck the blue planet. But this time, it happened much earlier. It seems the Forbidden Class Soul Reaper is truly unique. But he doesn't know the difference between his class and the Chosen Ones, endowed with a hidden purpose. He glanced at the door and left the room. When his parents arrived home, they were surprised to find the table set with various dishes prepared by their son. His father was perplexed, and his mother immediately began eating and patted her husband on the shoulder, asking, "Can't he see? Yuan doesn't often do this. He should eat quickly." Looking at them, MC thought that all people have one thing in common. Only after losing something very important do they begin to value it and look for ways to compensate for this deficiency. In his past life, he lived in ignorance, despising ordinary days. He constantly sat in his room and played a game. He didn't even go out to eat, and when his parents tried to do something about it, he furiously yelled at them. And when misfortune destroyed absolutely everything, he realized how stupid he had been. He joined them and said that today was Sunday. Tan won't come home for a snack? His mother told him that she said she was currently studying for a real exam, so she took the food with her to school. Maybe when he has time, he can take some food to his sister? That food is probably completely stale by now. She put a piece of food in her mouth and said with delight that she didn't know their son actually learned to cook. The chicken wings are amazing. She told her husband not to even think about fighting over them, and he said with a smile that it was all hers. At that moment, Yuan put his chicken wing on his plate and said that soon he would learn to cook something else. His parents looked at him in confusion and then smiled. From that day on, MC trained hard to better control the power that would come to him from the game. He finished another training session, this time running 50 meters in 5.5 seconds. Not bad, but that was just the beginning. He returned home and logged into the game immediately, finding himself in the same place. Suddenly, loud screams erupted from the sky. Looking up, he saw a huge flock of birds flying straight at him. They were common rank level 2 morning birds, and Yuan quickly dealt with them all, receiving 15 experience points for the 3 of them. It wasn't enough, but he had an idea. He made these birds his warriors and deliberately made them circle in one place to lure a pack of wolves, and they actually came. MC, who was hiding behind a rock meanwhile, thought it wasn't surprising at all. The ghostly wolves of the desert love such prey. He uncorked the monster essence, drank it, and each of his stats received a boost of 10. After that, he rushed into battle, deciding to warm up properly, and as soon as the wolves approached him, he swung his sword several times, quickly dealing with 4 of them. 2 wolves jumped at him, and upon noticing them, he immediately made a few deft moves and finished them off. But the wolves still weren't gone. They surrounded him from all sides, and he, clutching his sword tighter, thought they had arrived just in time. After that, he began to quickly move around the area, slashing at everyone in his path, killing 40 wolves and raising his level to 5th. After that, he sent them all into the gates of hell, filling them to the limit. Now his strength and physical abilities are within 20, and his agility and intelligence are almost 50. He drank the essence of the monster and his stats increased, so now his strength should be enough to fight elite monsters of the 5th level. After that, he headed into the city, as it was time to look for that very person. Soon he entered Black Sand and immediately headed down the street. Entering the dilapidated building, he saw Quincy, the local mage instructor, inside. Judging by his appearance, he liked to drink. He told him from the doorway that he wanted to learn something new and thought that in Immortal World, skills are usually obtained from books dropped by monsters and treasuries. Also, each class has its own instructor who teaches players skills. When he was a novice mage in his past life, this instructor, Quincy, helped him. The man said that he would teach him and receive enough money to buy drinks for half a month, and he thought that since he was a mage in his past life, he knew very little about the Soul Reaper class. However, this class can also use magic for infection. But he needed to learn the basic skills that Soul Reapers often use, and only then learn special skills. He told the man he wanted to learn Spiritual Flame, Healing Arts, and Stealth. He then tossed a bag of coins into his hands, and he replied that as long as he had money, everything would come true. He checked the coins, then extended a side of his hand and cast magic, telling him to try hard and let the glory of the mages shine upon him with its splendor. The system informed him that he had gained 3 mage class skills. Spiritual Flame of the black metal rank deals up to 100% damage to an enemy, requires 10 mana and has a 10-second cooldown. Healing Arts heals the selected target, restoring 10% health, requires 10 mana and has a 3-minute cooldown. The Stealth skill makes the user invisible for 5 seconds, requires 10 mana and has a 3-minute cooldown. He carefully read the skill descriptions and thought that Spiritual Flame allowed him to use ranged attacks, and Healing Arts could heal him and his allies. Stealth could save his life in critical moments. But these were too simple skills. If he wanted to learn higher level skills, he needed more resources. So he decided to move on and level up. Very soon he was already to the east of the city of Blacksand, on the mountain. As soon as he climbed the mountain, the system congratulated him on the discovery of a Cobalt mine. Kobolds are level 5 monsters that live in burrows and caves. They can also search for prey in the dark thanks to their heightened sense of smell. They attack from ambush because they are very cunning. As a rule, there are about 100 of them in one group, so due to his level, kobolds are the most suitable monsters. This way, he can level up by summoning his zombies. He drank a potion of night vision and having summoned wolves, entered the mine. He'll use these kobolds to improve his stealth and spiritual flame as much as possible, and then he'll find a couple of treasures. He took out a torch to improve his visibility and ordered the wolves to go ahead and clear the way, and after 15 minutes of wandering through the mine, they still hadn't found anyone. Suddenly, the torch's flame flickered, and MC noticed someone moving ahead, then immediately threw the torch in that direction, and the fire illuminated the monsters lurking in the darkness. They were already actively gnawing at the wolves that had gone ahead to scout. These monsters are level 5, and they have 2 skills, Dig and Strike. Immediately after that, he and his wolves rushed to attack, and the kobolds did the same in response. He and his wolves successfully killed 2 monsters, but they weren't fooled either. The wolves fell immediately under their blows. Yuan rushed forward, killing 8 more monsters, and thought that these kobolds themselves weren't that strong. The main thing was to repel their attacks. Suddenly, 4 of them pounced on him. He used the stealth skill, and the monster missed. While they were looking for him, he had already managed to move behind one of them and called him an idiot, saying that he was here. Immediately after that, he struck and, taking advantage of their confusion, quickly finished off the rest, killing 20 monsters. After that, he climbed higher and, looking over the pile of bodies, thought with a smile that he now had 5 out of 100 experience points for leveling up his stealth skill. But the stats of ordinary kobolds are still too pitiful, so leveling them up with their help will take a long time. He made them his warriors. They rose to their feet, and he saw all their stats. With the crush skill, they deal damage up to 5% of an enemy's health when they hit a target. He waved his hand, saying that from now on they would be working in place of the wolves, and ordered them to move forward to find him the local leader. Accompanied by 3 kobolds, he entered a large cave with many passages. He noticed something strange on the wall, some kind of slime cluster, and grinned because it was exactly what he was looking for. He immediately used magic, cast a fireball at the slime, and the system told him that he had killed 2 swamp liquids, for which he received 4 experience points. But it turned out that someone had been watching him from the darkness of the cave all this time. A huge kobold overseer jumped out of his hiding place and pounced on Yuan. This is a level 6 elite monster with the skills Dig and Whip. MC thought that since ancient times, the strong have preyed on the weak, such as the unshakable law of survival in nature. Ultimately, the predator is destined to become the prey, for mortal danger lurks at every turn. The kobold slashed its whip at the ground with a furious cry, raising dust, and Yuan thought that sometimes hunters could disguise themselves as prey and attack unexpectedly, just like he was doing now. The whip strike didn't hurt him at all. He simply stopped it with his bare hand. After that, he gripped the whip tighter and swung it, pulling the kobold toward him, and then struck it. The kobold rolled across the ground, knocking down every stone with its head, after which it angrily rose and was about to attack Yuan, but Yuan was right there next to it and delivered one powerful blow that finished it off. Mortally wounded, the kobold immediately fell to its knees, and then a loud growl was heard. Turning around, MC saw a huge pack of monsters, with 2 guards standing behind them. They swung their whip, activating their skill, and the system warned Yuan that the cave kobolds were entering a bloodthirsty state. Their attack speed was increased by 40%, their movement speed by 25%, and the effect lasted for 60 seconds. He counted about 50 of them, which was a lot, but his followers were just as strong. He summoned the gates of hell, ordering his zombies to come out and get some fresh air, then waved his hand towards the monsters and declared the hunt began. The giant wolf was the first to charge, leading a horde of smaller ones, As soon as they clashed with the kobolds, the giant wolf began to furiously swing its paws, pushing back the enemies, and then howled loudly, using the skill Devil Wolf Whip. The sound waves stunned the overseers, and then MC swung his sword, ordering the wolves to kill them. After that, the system began inundating him with notifications about killing kobold overseers. He eventually killed 40 of them and reached level 6. He then used his skill on the undead, making them his subordinates. Their living brethren, frightened by such a sight, decided to flee. Noticing this, Yuan immediately rushed after them and punished them for this decision, but suddenly something flashed over his head. Luckily, he noticed it in time and jumped aside, dodging a powerful hammer blow. The system informed him that the enemy had activated the Decisive Strike skill. Finally, the kobold boss appeared, a level 7 monster with increased stats. He rushed at MC from the darkness with a loud roar, and he said that he had been waiting for him for a long time. The kobold swung his hammer, but the protagonist dodged its attack, and the hammer sank into the cave wall. Then the protagonist swung his weapon and said, "Now." He struck, hitting the monster's chest guard, then jumped back and said, as expected of a boss, "It has such defense that it can barely scratch it." The boss then swung his hammer, scattering rocks around. Then he slashed forward, but the protagonist jumped back again, dodging its attack. He skidded to a stop on the ground and thought, "These attacks are anything but simple. Even for elite monsters, this is too much." Judging by his blows, his strength exceeds that of elite monsters by at least 3 times. Then he concentrated energy at his fingertips and said that he would create sufficient distance between them while continuing to deal damage. Then he summoned the undead. They must rise. The next second, the creatures he summoned charged at the monster, using skin, rout, and the demonic wolf's howl. The giant wolf appeared next to the monster, but it activated the Decisive Strike skill. The system reported that Decisive Strike deals double damage. The protagonist then extended his hand forward and said, "Attack." The ghostly wolves leaped onto the kobold and began gnawing at it from all sides. Then the giant wolf jumped aside, and the system reported that the party skill Rise in Fury had been activated, granting plus 10% attack power and plus 20% critical strike chance. The next second, it rushed at the monster and sank its fangs into the kobold's arm, releasing a powerful pulse of energy. At that moment, the protagonist activated the Spiritual Flame magic skill. He fired several volleys at the boss and thought, if he remembered correctly, the kobold boss was highly susceptible to magic. The next second, the smoke cleared, and the kobold growled loudly and ran at the protagonist, but he activated his stealth skill and, appearing behind the monster, leaped to attack, saying that since he had come to him, he should expect no mercy. He aimed for the neck and thought, right there, into unprotected flesh. He plunged the weapon into the boss's neck. He screamed loudly, and the protagonist jumped back, simultaneously dodging the monster's attack. Then he snapped his fingers and said, "Come to him." A giant wolf appeared next to him, and he grabbed its fur. Then a large number of kobolds appeared before him, and he said, "Only desperate attempts." Then the system reported, he killed 15 cave kobolds, he killed 10 kobold overseers, he killed 20 cave kobolds, he killed 35 cave kobolds. The next second, one of the monsters broke through the wolves and headed towards the protagonist, and he, noticing this, asked, "Is it trying to escape?" He grabbed his weapon and added, "First, he must give him his life." He instantly launched an attack and flew forward, cutting off the enemy's head. The next second, the body fell to the ground with a crash, and the system announced that he had killed the kobold chieftain, plus 50 experience points. He looked at the system window, which said, "Congratulations, his level had risen to 7. He thought, level 7, excellent. Now he was one step closer to level 10. Soon, he would be able to enter the main city in the western desert. He had finally mastered stealth and spiritual flame. He raised it to level 2 and doubled the effect. The system windows in front of him said, Spiritual Flame, Black Metal. Level 2, effect, deals 200% magic damage to the target. Requirements 10 mana points, cooldown 10 seconds, mastery 20 out of 200. Stealth, Black Metal, level 2, effect, stealth for 10 seconds, requirements 10 mana points, cooldown 3 minutes, mastery 10 out of 200. Then he turned sharply to the side, noticing a chest rising from the body of the monster, and said, "This is a bronze treasure." After that, he opened the chest, and the system reported, the kobold leather bag, the ever-burning torch, the skull mask, the shadow gloves were received. The item opened as a kobold leather bag. 20 gold coins were received. He looked at the bag of gold in his hand and said, as far as he remembered, major banks around the world will soon open channels for exchanging currency between the real and virtual worlds. 20 gold coins can be exchanged for 200,000 yuan in the real world. Not bad. Then a system window appeared in front of him, saying, Everlasting Torch. Effect, the player gains night vision within a 3-meter radius in dark places with no time limit. Black Mask, Bronze, type weapon. Effect, reduces physical damage by 5%, HP plus 10, strength plus 10. After that, he looked at the glove in his hand and asked in surprise, what? The system window said, Shadow Gloves, Silver, type weapon. Effect, the glove's power is equal to the kobold chieftain's. Defense plus 30, attack plus 30. Then he waved his hand and said, he's lucky. He got a silver weapon from the bronze treasury. And gloves, equal in power to the kobold chieftain. He can't wait to try them. Meanwhile, not far from the Cobalt Cave, Blood Guild leader Huang Feilong, a yellow flying dragon, class warrior, level 8. He placed his foot on the defeated monster, then walked to the edge of a small cliff and, swinging his weapon, said, "Their training was not in vain." In less than a minute, they had already destroyed 30 ghost desert wolves. Blood Guild deputy leader Huang Feihu, a yellow flying tiger, class thief, level 5, smiled and said, "As long as they are together, nothing is impossible for them, brothers." Wishing added, as expected of the leader and his deputy, "They destroyed so many ghost desert wolves in just one move. Their strength is truly admirable." Ron agreed. "Yes, if they meet those idiots from the Thunder Guild again, they will crush them into dust." Weixing said, "Exactly." Then Feihu frowned and said, "If that Yuan hadn't appeared out of nowhere, they would have killed the world boss first long ago. No guild dares to show off in front of them." The next second, the system reported that the giant wolf world boss had been killed by player Yuan. They were surprised. What? Then Feihu said that he had no idea what favored that scoundrel so much, but if he just caught his eye, he would taste his wrath. The guild leader turned to him and said how many times he had told him to think with his head. Yuan is a tyrant, don't underestimate his power. So, instead of feuding with him, it would be better for him to help them defeat him. Then he walked forward and added, as far as he remembered, there was a Cobalt cave not far from here. He would go check it out, and they should wait here and replenish their energy. Ron said that they obeyed. At that moment, Feihu thought, because of this wild dog, his older brother has already scolded him 3 times. It's unfair. He then pointed his finger forward and shouted, "Yuan, he must wait for him. Idiot! One day, he will tear out all his nails right in front of his older brother and chop off his head so that his older brother will see who is truly stronger." Then Ron said, "Deputy leader, he shouldn't be angry because of this worthless idiot." He pointed his finger forward and said, "They must see. What's there?" Feihu looked forward and asked, "What?" He looked at the girl and smiled maliciously. Meanwhile, MC walked forward and a system window appeared next to him, which said, Zombie Kobold Chieftain, level 7, HP 1000, attack 150. Defense 80. Skills, Dig, Immortality, Crushing Blow, deals 200% damage to the target with a 10% critical strike chance. He thought that he had added a zombie chieftain with impressive combat power to his collection. Besides, there were now 70 zombie monsters at the gates of hell. He would continue in the same spirit. At that moment, he heard Sabrina shout, "All of them, they must not come any closer. They must not move. If they take a single step, they must not expect mercy." At that moment, Ron approached her and said, "What luck." He never thought that he would meet such a beauty today. Feihu smiled and told her not to worry. They would just play with her a little. She should not resist. She should enjoy herself. Ron agreed. Yes, all she had to do was satisfy their deputy leader until he stopped her, and in return, she would get something worthy. Sabrina swung her staff and shouted, if they come any closer, she would attack. The next second, Feihu kicked the staff out of her hand and asked, how on earth did she intend to do that? She flew back from his blow, and then he grabbed her by the hair and said, yes, she is just an ordinary mage. She thinks she can hurt them? She needs to stop playing dumb. If she hasn't given up yet, now is the time. He approached her face and shouted, come on, come on! The more she resists, the more pleasant it is for him. She screamed loudly when he began to tug at her clothes. The next second, a fist flew into his face with such force that he was sent flying far back. The rest of the Blood Guild shouted in alarm, Deputy Leader. He crashed into a rock, and the protagonist said, while the effect was not bad, he expected the worst. At that moment, one of the guild members ran in the opposite direction and thought, oh my god, I need to tell the leader right now. At that moment, Wei Qing looked at the protagonist and asked, who is he? Ron pointed his finger at him and said, he's infuriating the Bloody Guild. He's facing imminent death. The protagonist looked at them and thought, Bloody Guild. In the initial phase of Immortal World, this guild was the first in Black Sand. Most of this guild's members are sinister players, whose names are colored scarlet. If the number of sins for these players exceeds 10, the system marks their names in red, as they are extremely dangerous, and all because of their crimes, attacking other players, stealing, looting. Although the sinister overlord hasn't yet invaded this world, and player deaths don't lead to death in the real world, equipment loss and level drops cause serious damage to players. Then the protagonist asked, hey, are they from the Bloody Guild? He thought that in his past life, these rats had gotten him into serious trouble. Wei Qing and Ron exchanged glances, and then Ron pointed at himself and said, yes, they were the #1 guild with the most incredible reputation in Black Sand. He had angered their deputy leader. He had to admit, fear gripped his heart. He adjusted the bandages on his hand and added, too late, but if he didn't want to die like a pathetic rat, he should cut off his own hands. Then get on all fours like a dog and call him Grandpa. The next second, MC flew forward, attacking 2 opponents at once, severing their limbs. They fell to the ground, screaming in pain. The protagonist stopped and said, he's grateful, of course, but he wouldn't mind cutting off the other guy's hands too. As for the dog, he'll bark all the way to hell. At that moment, Sabrina, watching what was happening, was surprised by how strong he was. Meanwhile, Feihu jerked his hand. An empty vial lay next to him, and the system reported that he had used a health elixir and restored 20% of his HP and mana. He extended his hand forward and said, "Damn idiot." He rose to his feet and angrily declared that he would definitely die now. At that moment, the guild leader approached the battlefield and said, "Come on, let's see who dared to do this. Who doesn't value their life at all?" His subordinate stepped forward and shouted, "Leader, he's there!" The protagonist turned around, and a member of the Bloody Guild, pointing a finger at him, shouted, "It's him!" He almost killed the deputy leader. Fei Long reached for the weapon behind his back and shouted, "Who?" Then he thought, wait. His gaze was cold and indifferent, but at the same time he felt its unprecedented power. It was as if his eyes were bathed in moonlight itself, glittering like the sharpest sword, capable of cutting through anything. His aura alone made one cower in a corner in fear. Then the boy shouted, "Leader, he must show this brat what they're capable of." Damn it, what kind of blind dog is he challenging them? Is he tired of living? You idiot? No matter, they'll help him now. And at that moment, Fei Long thought, damn, he's so strong, especially since he's holding a sword that he clearly obtained after killing a powerful monster. He's sure it's Yuan. Of all the people on Earth, these idiots decided to pick on him. Worthless. They just make things worse. Then the protagonist looked at him and asked, "Is he the leader of the Bloody Guild?" He thought he had to maintain his dignity. Looks like a fight is inevitable. At that moment, Feihu flashed across the sky and Sabrina cried out in alarm, "Watch out, he's behind you." A member of the Blood Guild rushed at the protagonist and shouted, "He must die, idiot." The leader also swung his weapon and shouted, "You brat, you decided to make enemies in the Blood Guild? The worst decision of his life." He thought this was his chance. Then he shouted in surprise, "What?" He noticed a kobold appear next to the protagonist, who swung his weapon, attacking his little brother. Then he looked in surprise at the protagonist heading towards him. Before he could shout, the protagonist launched an attack, leaving him lying on the ground. After that, the MC walked forward and said, "Yes, this guild is not to be taken seriously." Then a system window appeared in front of him saying, "Attention. They have detected that he killed a real player. He will receive +2 sin points." He thought, 2 points. If he doesn't receive any more sin points in a week, the counter will automatically reset. At that moment, Sabrina looked ahead and shouted in alarm, "Oh my god, they ran away? After them?" The protagonist replied, "But they're just small insects. Why bother?" Then a series of system windows appeared in front of him stating, "Explosive battle axe, silver, weapon type, effect. Upon hitting the target, the axe causes a powerful explosion, dealing damage to the target and surrounding enemies. Attack +40, strength +30. Dragonfang crossblade, silver weapon type. Effect: upon hitting the target, the blade spews flames, dealing continuous fire damage. Dexterity +30, attack +40. Spiked dagger, bronze, weapon type. Effect: attack +15, dexterity +20. Then he said thoughtfully, "Not bad. Even if he doesn't use this weapon, it can be sold profitably." At that moment, Sabrina approached him and, blushing with embarrassment, thanked him for saving her. She came closer and shouted that she didn't know his name yet. He looked at her, then walked further and said, "His name is..." One day will come when she will see his name in the top 10 players in the world. She looked at him in surprise and said, "In the top 10. Then she waved her hands and shouted, "Who cares about this list? Master, she's asking him to take her with him." After some time, a weeping desert. The protagonist walked forward and then noticed movement behind him. Several scorpions burst out of the ground, and a system window appeared which said, "Weeping Desert Scorpion. Normal, level 6, HP 400, attack 110, defense 20, skill Paralyzing Lightning Strike." Then MC got into a stance, delivered several spinning strikes at once, attacking the monsters in front of him. A vortex of dark energy spread around and the system reported, all 60 Weeping Desert Scorpions were destroyed in this zone. His level rose to 8. He thought, level 8 right away. Collecting paralyzing herbs isn't as exciting, but the reward he received was quite good. 2 days ago, the protagonist was standing in the hallway when Emor approached him, holding out his hand and saying, "Hero." They finally meet. A system window appeared in front of the protagonist, informing him that he had received a quest from the alchemist Emor. Should he accept it? The quest was called Emor's Will. The task was to go to the Weeping Desert, collect 100 units of paralyzing herbs, and deliver them to Emor. The time limit was 1 day. Rank black metal. Paralyzing herbs are thunder plants that grow in the desert. He thought that soon a special dungeon would open in the main city. The dungeon was teeming with thunder monsters, and to clear it, one would need to be highly resistant to lightning strikes. This would increase the demand for an effective potion against lightning strikes, and the price would skyrocket to thousands of gold coins. In his past life, someone had made a fortune from this. By completing this quest to gather paralyzing herbs, he received a recipe for an effective potion against lightning strikes. Today, Emor would come to Black Sand for the first time. After the quest was completed, he would retire forever. This meant that players had only one chance to obtain the recipe. Afterward, he accepted the quest and, looking at the monsters in the present, thought, the Crying Desert Scorpion is a level 6 monster guarding the paralyzing herb, but now it posed no threat to him. He had completed the quest successfully, so he would take this opportunity to maximize his herbalism skill. Then he reached out to the plant and a system window appeared, stating, Herbalism skill, black metal, level 2. Effect: increases gathering speed, adds a 5% chance to find rare herbs. Requirement: 1 intelligence point, cooldown, 3 seconds, mastery, 120 out of 200. He collected the plant, then rose to his feet, thinking he'd move on. Then he took a step, and taking another step, he thought in surprise, this. The next second, a huge scorpion stinger erupted from the ground, and he jumped to the side. Then it skidded to a stop on the ground, and he shouted, "Lightning destroying silver!" He looked in surprise at the enormous monster that had appeared, and a system window appeared in front of him, saying, "A mutated monster, a crystal demon scorpion of the weeping desert." The system kept reporting danger, and MC approached and wondered, "Where did the mutated monster come from?" The system window said, "Crystal Demon Scorpion of the Weeping Desert, level 10, HP 2800, attack 400, defense 400, skills, Paralyzing Lightning Strike, Poison Needle, Earth-Rending Claw, Crystal Lightning." He smiled and said, even though things were getting more complicated now, today he would sharpen the edge of his silver-destroying blade for the first time. He charged, swung his weapon, and then struck, after which he leaped onto the monster's body, thinking that its armor left no room for a blow. The next second, the system reported that the boss was activating the Paralyzing Lightning Strike skill. The entire area sparkled with lightning strikes, and the protagonist thought, that's it. He continued trying to plunge his weapon into the monster's body, and then the system reported that the boss was activating the Poison Needle skill. A huge stinger was aimed straight at him, but he managed to jump to the side in time and stopped in front of the monster. He frowned and said that he was much stronger than he expected. First, he needed to weaken his combat power. They looked at each other, and then he said, "Come on, Cobalt, he must rise." The next second, zombie monsters under their command appeared from the portal that had formed. They began to fight the scorpion, and MC, watching what was happening, wondered if the double damage effect hadn't worked. Then the system reported that the boss was using the Crushing Claws skill. He slammed his massive claw forward, knocking several zombies back, but several bursts of magical energy flew at him in response, and the protagonist shouted, he must feel the power of his improved flame. The monster's HP continued to drop, and the protagonist thrust his hand forward and shouted, "Attack!" At that moment, the kobolds grabbed the monster's claws with ropes, tightening them. After this, the leader pushed off the ground and jumped up, after which he delivered a powerful blow with his hammer to the monster's head. MC shouted, "Double damage effect activated." The system reported, "Critical hit, double damage effect successfully activated." Then the monster opened its mouth wide, screaming loudly. The protagonist jumped up sharply, and concentrating energy in his hands said, "Since its armor cannot be penetrated directly, let's go." The system reported, "It has been detected that the player has the Hunter-Killer title, attack increased by 10%, the chance of activating double damage by 10%, and magic damage by 10%. He swung his fist and shouted that he would shatter it into pieces, turn it into a pile of fragile remains. He must prepare to meet his inevitable doom. With these words, he delivered a powerful blow, releasing a powerful stream of energy throughout the monster's body. The next second, the scorpion fell to the ground, and the protagonist jumped to the side and landed on one knee. The system reported that he had successfully killed the transformed demonic beast, the Crystal Thunder Scorpion Assassin, and he had received 560 experience points. Then the scorpion rose to its feet again, but its body had changed, and the system reported, Crystal Thunder Scorpion Assassin, level 10, HP 2800, attack 400, defense 55, skills, Paralyzing Lightning Strike, Penetrating Poison Needle, Crushing Claws, Crystal Thunderstorm, Undead Body. Paralyzing Lightning Strike, lightning attack inflicts paralysis for 1 second. Penetrating Poison Needle, a tail needle strike that deals 10 poison damage. Crushing Claws deals 250% of attack damage on impact. Crystal Lightning Storm launches crystals in a 360-degree radius, dealing 100% attack damage. Undead Body, passive effect, description not provided. Then MC looked to the side and noticed scorpions approaching them. He frowned and said how lucky they were. He shouted that they would now meet his new tamed pet. Then the system announced the Crystal Lightning Storm skill was being used. Powerful streams of energy flew around, hitting the enemies. The protagonist kicked off the ground and, swinging his weapon, flew forward, spinning around himself, cutting through several monsters. The system reported that the weak spot had been hit. He then stopped in the center of the scattered monster bodies, and the system reported a level increase. He had reached level 10. A system window appeared in front of him, stating, Player, Yuan, Abyssal Forest, level 10. Abilities, Soul Reaper, Sealed, Talent Dark Summoning, Spiritual World Gate, 20 out of 100, Strength, 32, Constitution, 28, Dexterity, 47, Spirit, 53, Experience, 152 out of 159. The protagonist looked at this and said, this feeling 2 levels in a row is indescribably pleasant. Then the system reported, Silver equipment received, Lightning Spear, Guardian Greaves, Paralysis Ring, and Ghost Bracer. He thought that all the items in the chest were silver ranked. If he sold some of them, he could seriously improve his parents' lives. Then he looked at the monster bodies, and the system reported, All the demonic beasts in the area have been destroyed. They congratulate him. He obtained a gold rank skill corresponding to his unique ability. He looked at the concentrated energy in his hands, and then a book appeared, and he thought, that's it. The system reported, Curse of Darkness, gold rank, learning conditions, only for soul reapers. He placed his hand on the book cover and uttered a word of good fortune. The system reported that the skill was automatically recorded in the player's memory. The next second, a powerful energy pierced his body, and a beam of this energy shot into the sky. The system congratulated him on obtaining the Soul Reaper's exclusive skill, Curse of Darkness. A huge number of skulls flew around, and a system window appeared, saying, Curse of Darkness, gold rank, level 1, effect, deals damage equal to 20% of current HP, or restores 20% of the HP of allied undead. Mana, 100, cooldown 10 seconds. Mastery, 0 out of 100. Then he looked at the flame that had formed on his hand and said, that means he can restore 20% of the undead's health. He then turned around, looked at the scorpion's health, and then directed a stream of energy forward, saying he'd try. The next second, the system reported that the health points had been restored to 80%. After that, MC clenched his fist and said, the warm-up is over. It's time to go to the main city to look for the first subordinate. Then he turned around and said, wait, really? In the present? He felt his mother put her hand on his shoulder and, calling him, said, Dad's back is hurting. He should go and help him. The protagonist took off his helmet and looked at her. After a while, he helped his father sit down on the sofa and said, Dad, be careful. His father lay down on his stomach, and the mother of the family, reaching out to him, asked why he, at his age, was still acting so recklessly. He started fixing the air conditioner, not knowing what to do with himself. Couldn't he have just called a repairman? And now his back was sore. He lay on his hands and said, you need to save money where you can. Just look at last week when the washing machine broke, he fixed it himself in a couple of minutes. It was nothing, he just dragged it out a bit. He'll sleep on it and it'll pass. He still has to go to school tomorrow to pick up Tan. The protagonist looked at him and closed the door behind him. The next day, the protagonist's parents were lying in bed and then they walked into the hallway, and the mother, holding her husband, asked, Yuan, is that him? Why is he making so much noise so early? Then they looked in surprise as several workers installed a new television. Then one of them approached the father of the family and asked, apologies, are they Mr. Lin? These are the new items Mr. Yuan ordered. They delivered everything and installed it as quickly as possible. Please, they should check the delivery. They looked at them in fear, and then the mother of the family asked, wait, is she awake right now? What's going on? Meanwhile, MC was working out in the gym. At that moment, Jian approached him and apologized for disturbing him. He said, does he want to sign up for the VIP package? Pay for the whole year at once. After that, he handed her his card and said, okay, here's his card. He thought that he had sold the equipment he no longer needed, renovated the house, and signed up for a family gym membership. After all, his parents and Tan should start training early so they could adapt more easily when they entered the Immortal World stage. At that moment, Jian glanced at the card and, blushing with embarrassment, thought, my God, this client has been training for a long time, but his face is not at all red, he's not even out of breath, and what a figure he has, a real athlete. Then her eyes widened in surprise, and she said, isn't this a premium VIP card that's only given to those with over 5 million in their account? At that moment, the protagonist answered the phone and said, yes, that's right. This is the prize money from a gaming tournament. Okay, they should rest at home today and he'll go get Tan himself. Jian looked at the card again and thought, he really is an incredible person, so young, and has already achieved so much. After some time, Shushui No. 1 High School. The students dispersed in different directions and said, class is over. They should hurry to the internet cafe nearby. They'll gather a team. At that moment, Tan walked forward and her classmates who were following her started chatting. Hey, it's her birthday today, so she should come to her house. Her brother bought her favorite strawberry cake. The girl smiled and said, wow, she's lucky. Having an older brother is so great. She's jealous. If only she had a brother too. At that moment, Tan looked down and thought, brother? Yeah, nothing to envy. She remembered how she had peeked into his room, seen him playing. She had walked forward and thought that personally, she wouldn't want to have a brother at all. Phil had approached her and said, Tan, the school beauty, how proud she was. They had tried to invite her so many times through acquaintances, but she had always refused. Robert, folding his arms across his chest and smiling, said, but this time they had come themselves, in person. So for once she should show some respect. She looked at them seriously and asked, what do they want from her? At that moment, her classmates approached her and asked, who are these people? Robert came close to her, pointing his hand towards her, saying how smooth her skin was. She should let him touch it. But she slapped his hand away and shouted at him not to touch her. He should take his hands away and move away. She pointed her finger at him and added, if he touches her again, she'll call the police. This time, he hit her from behind and shouted, she doesn't deserve any respect. She screamed loudly and fell to the ground from the blow, and her classmates shouted in alarm, representative. Then Robert swung his arm again and shouted, does even the slightest insult offend her? Why pretend to be innocent then? Tan covered herself with her hands and closed her eyes, but at that moment the MC grabbed the attacker's arm and asked who gave him permission to harass his sister. Tan asked in surprise, Yuan? Then Robert swung his free hand and shouted, damn it, where did that mongrel come from? The other bullies prepared prepared for battle and shouted, "Today, if he doesn't knock all his teeth out, he's not him. He's apparently tired of living. Stop talking. First they'll break his arm, and then they'll talk." But the next second, the protagonist punched Phil in the face, then followed up with a few more punches, finishing with a powerful kick to Robert's face. He pinned him to the ground, and the schoolchildren gathered around, watching in surprise. After this, the main character said, "Let's go." After a while, they walked forward, and Tan, looking at her brother, asked why he even came today. She thought, all he does is play games all day. Why did he suddenly come to school for her? He replied, "Dad pulled his back. Mom stayed home to take care of him." She looked at him and screamed in fear. "Pulled his back? Is it bad?" MC looked at her and, putting his hands in his pants pockets, replied, "No, nothing serious." Then they continued walking forward, and Tan thought she hadn't remembered such a conversation between them for a long time. It felt somehow awkward. Then the girls called out to her, "Class president." They came closer and started chatting. Is this really her brother? He's nothing like the lazy slob she called him. She had no idea Senior Yuan was so cool and handsome. Why hadn't she told them anything about him before? Tan looked at her brother and thought, cute, this guy. Voices were murmuring all around. Who the hell is he? So handsome. He's a senior, one of the graduating seniors. He's way more attractive than all the guys in school. Tan thought, unexpectedly, he's very popular. Then a schoolgirl approached him and, smiling, said hello. The protagonist returned her greeting, and Tan thought, what, was he always this tall? Why hadn't she noticed before? Did he even have muscles? No wonder he dealt with those jerks so easily. Then the classmate said goodbye, and Tan, waving her hand, said that they would see each other tomorrow. Then she looked at the protagonist, who sat down and told her to sit too. She blushed with embarrassment and, waving her hand, said no need, she could walk on her own. She wondered what he was doing. She really didn't want to be carried on someone's back in front of all these people. Then he pulled her toward him, and she looked ahead in fear. He sat her on his back, and she screamed, "Stop." He said that all her classmates had already left, and if she couldn't walk, she shouldn't overexert herself. She'd been pushed, and she'd hurt her ankle, right? She frowned and wondered when he'd noticed. After a while, they entered the apartment, and MC said they were back. Tan called her parents, and they were talking about something. After that, her father looked at them and said, the main thing is that they were both home. After that, the main character started washing the dishes, and the mother of the family, calling her daughter, told her to look at her brother. He's a completely different person, right? Her husband agreed with her. Yeah, he cooks sometimes and sometimes buys home appliances. The mother added, yes. The relationship between them had become like in childhood, warm again. Everything had changed a lot. At that moment, Tan, sitting next to her, asked, really? She thought, what a strange man. Maybe he really had changed. Then the MC said that he had everything prepared. He took off his apron and added that he would be in his room. After that, he slammed the door behind him, and Tan thought, what did she expect from him? That's right, a withdrawn, unemployed gamer sitting at home. The next second, the protagonist returned and handed her a pack of pills. He told her to take them after the shower. They are very good for recovery. Then he returned to the room and said that he was going to play, so unless it was urgent, she should not come to him. Then Tan held the pill pack in her hands, closed her eyes, and said, great, no one was going to come see him. Then the mother of the family asked, does she see? She said they had become closer. But what happened at school today? She replied, nothing, Mom. She's going to take a shower. At that moment, the protagonist sighed loudly, then sat down in his chair and said, that concludes the household chores of the last few days. He looked at the helmet, then putting it on, said that he was now returning to the game. After some time, the main area, the windy sands, he sank to the ground, covering it with cracks, and looking seriously ahead, said, it's time to find and get that rat out. The system reported that he had entered the windy sands area. He looked at the building in front of him, and after a while, the man lay on the ground and, pointing his hand forward, shouted loudly, honorable officer, he swears to heaven this is just a misunderstanding. At that moment, an officer stepped on him and shouted, silence, stop lying. He should be preparing to repent in prison. Then he glanced sharply to the side and thought, that's strange. Was it his imagination? At that moment, MC hid behind the wall and thought, street patrolmen have a keen sense of criminality, and if you calculate the time it takes for the sin level to return to 0, you'll need to remain in the shadows for at least 3 more days. Then he said, but this is just the right moment to return to what he hadn't seen in a long time. His old friend. Sometime later in the church, Lawrence waved his hand and said, in the name of God, the darkness of his past is washed away. And from that moment on, his soul will be as pure as pristine snow, and the holy light will illuminate his path. Now he will perform the rite of baptism. At that moment, a man knelt before him, and then the protagonist entered the room and said that he came from a charity house for the poor. He looked at him, and the protagonist added that he had heard that there was a patient in critical condition here, and he had come to help him. He replied that in that case, they would be grateful for help in curing Knight Douglas's illness. He replied, okay. Meanwhile, Douglas Wayne lay on the bed. The protagonist thought he had once been a member of one of the most powerful knightly orders of the ancient Western Desert Kingdom, the Order of the Scorpion Lions. In his past life, when he was level 15, he had barely managed to obtain a golden weapon from him. Then he approached his bed and said, Mr. Douglas, I have come specifically to cure the poison in his body. He looked at him and, noticing his level 10, sat up in bed. Then he grinned and asked, him? Just a level 10 mage? Even a street patrolman is stronger than him. Then he emptied his stomach right onto the blanket in front of him. The MC said, the poisons in his body have already begun to destroy his organs. If he doesn't accept his treatment, he won't live more than a month. He looked at it thoughtfully and then said, to cure the poisons in his body, he needs 1,000 rotten fish oil. If he's not afraid of death, he should go and try his luck in the filthy clay desert. The system reported that he had activated a quest requesting Douglas. Should he accept it? Quest name, Douglas's request. Quest level, gold. The content, he must obtain 1,000 rotten fish oil and cure the poisons in Douglas's body. He answered, of course. After some time, he arrived at the filthy clay desert. Many fish swam in the pond. The system reported rotten fish oil, elite, level 15, HP 3,500, attack 300, defense 45, skills, tail wave jump, fish curse resonance. At that moment, the guild members jumped back sharply, screaming loudly. Han Qing flew forward, shouting, they must wait. These fish have very sharp teeth. They must let him bite. Attack. At that moment, the archer fell to the ground and screamed, his back falling, and the fish released a powerful pulse of energy. Qing flew to the side, dodging it, while several more men dived into the pool and shouted for help. The system reported that the tailwave jump skill had been activated. The fish flicked its tail and then opened its mouth. Qing rose high and, gritting his teeth, looked into the monster's mouth and thought, this time his death is certain. But at that moment, the protagonist flew next to him and, throwing him back, grabbed him by the collar, tossed him aside, and told them to stay out of its way. He concentrated energy in his hand and then directed a stream of magical energy at the monster, causing an explosion, and then the protagonist pressed his hand to the ground. The next second, Qing skidded to a stop and, placing his hand on his neck, asked, did he survive? Then he turned to the side and shouted for him to wait. He looked at the protagonist, who had flown forward, and asked, where did that great hero from just a moment ago go? At that moment, MC concentrated energy in his hand and, flying forward, unleashed several attacks at once, hitting every monster in his path. Several angry monsters then leaped toward him, and Qing cried out in alarm, great hero, he must be careful. The monsters began to approach the protagonist, but he jumped aside and cried out, is this all they can't do? He landed, then drew his weapon and said, trash, even if they gather in a flock, is still trash. He held his sword in front of him and then delivered several slashing attacks to the monsters in front of him. At that moment, his guild member Qing exclaimed, damn it, what kind of hero is this? There were 8 of them, they were almost crushed, and he's cutting down 5 of them by himself. He's incredibly strong, but even he can't handle these fish alone. After all, the most dangerous thing about these monsters is their group attack skill. At that moment, Qing looked ahead in fear, noticing how the monsters began to concentrate energy and release huge clouds of smoke. The protagonist looked ahead in surprise. The energy concentrated around him, and the system announced that the mutated fish were activating a group skill, Echo of the Council's Venomous Fangs. All enemies within the affected area would be struck by a poisonous fog, inflicting negative status effects such as confusion and auditory hallucinations. At that moment, a magical symbol appeared above the protagonist's finger, and he uttered, it's just a pathetic trick, I won't fall for it again in this life. Then he shouted, he must rise, giant wolf. The next second, his beast appeared from the portal, and the protagonist shouted, he must use the skill Hungry Wolf Howl. The next second, the wolf stood on the edge of the cliff and howled loudly. The system reported, target hit. The mutated fish fell into a stunned state. The protagonist then put his hand to his face and said, and now. The system reported, mask awakening, effect, one-time protection from poisonous fog. Then he swung his weapon. The mask appeared on his face. He jumped off the cliff and shouted for them to have courage and meet their death. He swung his weapon, dealing critical hits to the monster's vulnerable points. He did this several times, moving forward and shouting that they must die. He stopped on the mountain of monsters he had killed and felt energy approaching him from behind, and said, too slow. If they like to pretend to be stinking insects in the mud so much, then they should rot underground forever. They are idiots. He threw forward his sword, around which the energy was concentrated, and the next second, a powerful explosion occurred from ahead. Then Qing pointed forward and said in surprise, wow. His teammate shouted, it's too early to relax. He has to see. They're coming. And the protagonist, standing next to the summoned scorpion, said, forward. Thunder Zombie Scorpion. The system reported that the Crystal Storm skill had been activated. A slashing attack moved forward, and then bursts of magical energy erupted from the boss's body, hitting the pile of monsters in front of them. The next second, Rowan clutched his head in bewilderment and shouted, just as he said, it's useless. There are too many of them. They're much stronger. You can't defeat them in one blow. At that moment, the protagonist pushed off the monster's body and, jumping onto a cliff, said, who said he wanted to kill everyone? The others looked at him in surprise, and Qing asked, wait, what the hell? His teammate shouted, judging by where the scorpion is heading, it looks like it's aiming for the females' stomachs. He must have noticed. It seems the males have started attacking each other. At that moment, the fish actually started eating each other. And MC thought, when a dying female lays eggs or dies, she releases a huge amount of sticky substance that attracts the males and drives them crazy. They start protecting the eggs. so they attack everyone indiscriminately. Then he said that he will use this to make them kill each other. Then one of the monsters approached them. Ching shouted, "Sir, be careful." The monster's toothy mouth was approaching them, and Ching shouted, "What? Is that the female? Why is it so huge?" And then the protagonist said, "It's about time." He shouted, "Ghost wolves, attack." He pointed his hand forward, and several wolves jumped on the monster, sinking their fangs from different sides. Then he said, as expected of a level 15 elite monster, even 6 ghost wolves couldn't finish it off. After that, he took up his weapon and added, "But as long as he can hold it in, killing this monster is much easier." The next second, the system reported that 1 elite fish had been killed. He then swung his weapon, slitting open the creature's belly, and shouted, "Like this." He took a few eggs, and Ching asked, "What is Master doing?" The protagonist turned to them and told the wolf holding the monster's head in its mouth to go to that stone in the middle. The next second, the wolf jumped onto the right spot, and the protagonist shouted, "Exactly." Then the wolf opened its mouth wide and howled loudly. MC shouted for him to gather them. At that moment, the monsters headed to that spot, and the protagonist shouted, "Then he must lure all the males." The fish smelled the eggs, and the protagonist shouted, "Now they're stunned." The guy said he knew fish eggs attract males, so he wants to create a source of pheromone to drive the whole school crazy. After this, the protagonist concentrated energy around himself, pointing his hand forward, saying, "This is not enough. Go ahead, now it's their turn to taste the best drink." At this moment, several more of his undead species came forward. MC said, "Go ahead." The undead began to fight the monsters, and Rowan shouted, "Is that the blue poison of the males?" The protagonist noticed that it was correct. Inside the males, a sac of blue poison grows. It is somewhat similar to capsaicin. The poisonous gas and foul odor are a danger signal for these fish. Then they heard the sounds of the monsters, which began to swim in different directions. One of those present was surprised and said, "That's why they swim at least 5 meters away. They are very afraid." The protagonist added, "Moreover, they are not even immune to their own poison. Once under its influence, they can only hope for mercy." Then Ching shouted joyfully, "They are gone. No more fish." With that, the protagonist said, "Now all that's left is to complete the mini-quest and collect the loot." With that, he jumped off the cliff. Those watching him said, "He cleared the entire zone single-handedly. Amazing. Simply amazing." Ching folded his hands in front of him and joyfully said that he would gladly be a decoration on his leg. The next second, MC began cutting up the monsters and said, "Done." He climbed back onto the cliff, and the system reported that he had earned 12,000 experience points and increased his level to 11. He reflected that thanks to the countless battles in his past life, he had managed to cope so quickly. After that, he removed his mask and thought that it had also helped him win this battle. It was a shame that this could only be used once, since he had bought it for 5 gold coins. Such a waste, but it was worth the effort. Then he held out the vessel, in which energy began to gather. The system reported, rotten fish oil, 1,000 grams, extracted from the fatty body of a rotten fish from the mud desert. One of the ingredients for high-level healing potions. Effect: it has a miraculous effect on festering and ulcerated wounds, restoring damaged skin cells. Afterwards, the protagonist looked at the red orb and said, "Oh, he almost forgot." The system window in front of him said, "Wave Caresser Nose Silver. Type, Armor. A flexible spherical shell made of rotten fish skin. When pressed, it makes a sound, vibrates, and glows. Effect: it emits rotten fish pheromones, causing panic in small and medium-sized aquatic creatures." The protagonist looked at it in surprise and thought, the quest rewards are good, but the design was clearly a gimmick from a developer who really wanted to make fun of them. How could such a powerful thing look like a clown's nose? At one point, Ching approached him and shouted, "Wow, so cool. And it glows. My god, it even moves." The protagonist asked, "Does he like this thing?" He shouted joyfully, "This is unique. Sir, can he buy this from him? He can name any price." At that moment, Rowan put his hand on his shoulder and said that he was sorry. He was always like this. After that, the protagonist gave him a nasty look and said that it was a gift. Ching told him to wait. He should at least let him pay. But the protagonist replied that it wasn't worth it. The next second, huge wings appeared behind his back, and Ching shouted in surprise, "Sir, he's a real angel." Rowan, looking at him, thought, what was he talking about? Who would even want to pay for such a thing? Sometime later in the church, MC poured the contents of the potion onto Douglas's chest. He asked in surprise, "What?" He sat up in bed and, looking at the protagonist, said that he didn't think he could actually handle it. Then the system reported that he had successfully completed the golden quest, Douglas's request, and he received a reward, a golden weapon, the green spirit blade. He looked at the sword and thought, finally, the green spirit blade, the first gold-ranked weapon he'd acquired in his past life. The system window that appeared said, green spirit blade, gold, weapon type, effect, plus 150 attack power, plus 150 magic damage, plus 100 intelligence. Acquired skill, Cursed Seal of the Green Spirit. Cursed Seal of the Green Spirit has a range of 100 to 150 meters, deals 150% damage to the victim, has no cooldown, and requires 10 mana. He thought while the basic effect is rather mediocre, the acquired skill, Cursed Seal of the Green Spirit, is extremely effective in combat, especially its hidden effects. With each strike, it accumulates green spirit energy within the enemy, and after 3 strikes, it deals an additional 250% damage. Meanwhile, the green spirit blade had helped him navigate the western desert, becoming the best mage in the entire desert. He looked at the weapon in his hand again, and the system reported a reputation reward. Acquired, plus 1,000 reputation in the main city, plus 500 reputation with the Scorpion Knights. He thought, even though he didn't get as many reputation points as in his previous life, it was still enough to wander around the city. Then he noticed another system window and thought in surprise, what? There's more. The system window said that thanks to his brilliant completion of the quest, he received the NPC affinity reward, plus 10 to his affinity with Douglas. He thought, everything seems different now. Then Douglas smiled, looking at him, and said that he was grateful, brother. If not for him, he wouldn't have lived a month. The protagonist replied that it was the least he could do. Then Douglas said that as a thank you, he wanted to warn him. MC thought, is it because he got 10 similarity points thanks to the hidden storyline? Then Douglas said that if he meets someone named Quincy, he should stay away from him. In response, the protagonist said, Quincy is his teacher. What's wrong? He shouted in surprise. What? His teacher? Even though he hid his class, he is actually a soul reaper. Is that right? With these words, he got up from the bed, and the protagonist looked at him seriously and asked how he knew. He thought that he hid his profile, and even Quincy did not see his class. He said that when he was a knight in the Order of the Scorpion Tail, they directly reported to the king and carried out a variety of secret missions, one of which was hunting soul reapers. For this, he learned a special skill, darkness recognition. The protagonist asked, darkness recognition? He replied that darkness recognition is a special skill of the Scorpion Tail Order. As soon as a Soul Reaper appears, he immediately knows they're nearby. The closer the Soul Reaper is, the stronger the signal. MC asked, so he knew everything from the start? He thought there were actually some skills created specifically to fight Soul Reapers. Douglas looked at his hand and said no, he was poisoned, which impaired his perception. At first he didn't notice, but now he's healthy and knows everything. He senses the presence of the Dark Lord, and there's no way to hide it. The protagonist asked, the Dark Lord? He said he'd have to go back to the distant past. The most famous legend in the immortal world speaks of 5 gods: the god of light, the god of moon shadow, the god of nature, the god of water, and the god of the soul. But there used to be a 6th god, the Dark Lord. He was also called the King of the Dead. He's the strongest god. Having sensed his power, the Dark Lord did whatever he wanted. He imbued his most loyal followers with immense dark power. He changed their class, turning them into Soul Reapers, thereby forcing their obedience. Carrying out the Dark Lord's orders, the Soul Reapers not only spread the plague, killing millions, but also turned the dead into zombies, wreaking havoc. The world united and resisted the Dark Lord, destroying all temples and burning all records of him. All Soul Reapers were killed, and then the class was banned. Then, he placed his hand on his chest and added, that same Soul Reaper poisoned him, and he suffered for 10 whole years. He even resigned himself to the fact that he was about to die, and then he appeared. The protagonist frowned and thought, in his last life, he was a simple mage. He never imagined that legend would hide such a secret. So that's why the Soul Reaper class is forbidden. It's a good thing he kept his profile hidden all this time. Now, things were even more complicated. He thought that by solving the problem with a minus, he would be able to find some clues about the emblem in the capital. But now, if he can't hide the presence of the Dark Lord, his class could be exposed at any moment. Then he asked, Douglas, is there a way to avoid being recognized by the Dark Order of the Scorpion Tail? He clenched his fist and replied, if only Quincy helps him. But if he finds out the truth, he's a dead man, because his wife was killed by a Soul Reaper. That's why he told him to stay away from him. Sometime later, in the rocky desert, the protagonist walked forward and the system reported that he had returned to the rocky desert. 10 minutes ago, Douglas shouted indignantly, have you lost your mind? Is he seriously going to Quincy? He only dreams of tearing all the Soul Reapers to pieces. MC turned to him and said that he had no choice. He thought that if he didn't solve the problem with the presence of the Dark Lord, he would be in great danger. He has to get rid of him. The next second, he felt a flash of energy heading towards him, and turning slightly asked, what? He jumped sharply to the side and asked, what's the matter? And Fei Long said that he'd been waiting and waiting for him, and he finally caught him. Fei Hu smiled and said that last time he lured him into an ambush, but today he brought 30 brothers. He slung his weapon over his shoulder. Fei Long stepped forward and asked, well, is he ready to die? Fei Hu smiled and added, when he cuts his head off, he should scream louder. He wants to hear it. At that moment, an insect flew over them, and a notification appeared on people's phones. The Bloody Guild had started a stream. The guild leader said that he welcomed them, the lucky ones. They were very lucky to have caught their stream. Fei Huo smiled and added, so today they will show you how to tear his man to pieces. The viewership rose to 212, and the audience was surprised. What? The Blood Guild wants to plunder the newbies on live television again? Wow. 30 people against 1. Who is so unlucky as to stand in the path of the Blood Guild? He thinks he knows him, and he's a handsome man. It's a shame he'll die soon. At that moment, the protagonist said, they're just errand boys, not even fit for a warm-up. Since they've come for death, I'll have to kill them again. The audience commented on the broadcast, wow, he's so brave. The Blood Guild. Kill them again? He thinks he's cool. Selling gossip in the front row, waiting to be destroyed. Then Fei Long shouted in irritation, kill him. The fighters ran forward. One of the mages launched an electric attack. The apprentice prepared for the shot and shouted that he must die. At that moment, the The system reported that a malicious attack had been detected, with a 15-minute retaliatory strike. Killing all attackers within those 15 minutes would not affect his sin level. The protagonist placed his sword in front of him, smiled, and said, 15 minutes is enough to kill them 3 times over. The zombie army, they must come out and play. The next second, his army appeared on the battlefield, and MC, waving his hand to the side, said, such a pitiful flash, and he calls that lightning? He easily deflected the electric charge flying toward him, and then ordered the thunder scorpion to poison them. The next second, the scorpion rushed forward and pierced one of the attackers with its sting. The next second, the leader of the bloody guild shouted, attention everyone, warriors must retreat, they must defend themselves. Mages attack, bandits and archers open fire, ready. The next second, they began to concentrate magical energy and shouted, harder. At that moment, one of the mages concentrated a huge electrical charge in his staff and then directed it forward, straight at the protagonist's army. Arrows also flew forward, piercing the protagonist's army. The number of viewers dropped from 212 to 168. They were commenting on the broadcast. This elite level 8 team is easy to kill with a simple summon. He's leaving. Another newbie trying to show off. They have to place bets. They have to bet on how long this guy will last. At that moment, Fei Long stood up and asked, so what if he can summon the dead? Even if he summons that brute like last time, they'll tear everyone to pieces. Fei Hu added that he'll die today. The protagonist grinned and asked, really? The leader frowned and noticed he was smiling. The next second, the mage stepped forward, then let out a frightened cry. The sand beneath them softened, forming a vortex that began sucking players into it. At that moment, one of the falling mages noticed the kobold chieftain approaching him and let out a frightened cry as the monster swarmed forward, attacking everyone in its path. The guild members screamed for help, and the leaders were surprised. The number of spectators had risen to 302. They were writing, what's going on? An attack from underground. These undead are attacking together? Who said he was a newbie? And who said he blown to pieces? Now they're the only ones lying on the ground. Everyone started laughing, and then one of the mages shouted, careful, there's poison in there. They need to cleanse the wound first, then heal. The next second, a powerful stream of magical energy released by the protagonist hit them. The next second, the protagonist suddenly grabbed his sword and stabbed it into the attacker, who cried out in surprise. How did he know? He replied, at least he's not stupid enough to hide in the sand. The others screamed, he's too strong. All the tanks are dead. They have to run. At that moment, Fei Hu, his face contorted with rage, shouted, damn it, bunch of useless idiots. He leaped forward and shouted that he would kill him himself. At that moment, the MC concentrated energy in his sword and directing it forward, shouted, he must taste this. Numerous skulls flew forward. He used the green soul curse. Fei Hu stopped, looked at this in fear, and shouted, what the? And the protagonist flew further and shouted, execute. He walked past Fei Hu and then said, 3, 2, 1. The next second, his body exploded. Like everything around him, the protagonist placed his hand on the hilt of his sword and said, his old friend came in handy. The number of viewers increased to 558. They were writing, what? He paid money? The boss kept bragging, and ended up turning into a firework himself. He wanted to tear him to pieces, and now he's torn to pieces. He needs a servant? He's a great cheerleader. Then the broadcast system reported that Fei Hu had physically left the stream. The remaining one, hearing cries for help, wondered if he was hallucinating. It had only been a couple of days, but now it felt like he was fighting a demon. At that moment, the MC turned his gaze to him, and the leader of the bloody guild screamed in fear, begging him not to kill him. At that moment, the protagonist approached him and said, now it's his turn to know what despair is. With these words, he pointed his sword forward, hitting Fei Long's head. He said that it was all over. Then he pointed his hand at the insect and added that he almost forgot. The next second, a small explosion occurred in the sky. He said, it's so quiet here now. Sometime later in one of the skyscrapers, people were chatting, asking why the hell the boss caused this streaming glitch. Does anyone know him? He's very strong. He once killed a huge wolf. He saw it all with his own eyes. Where is he now? He wants to meet him. It looks like he's in the rocky desert. The mercenary guild has sent out an invitation for S-Class. At that moment, Fei Hu placed his drink on the table and said, Yuan, immortal world, a hail of dust and stone. Quincy leaned against a barrel and lay down. MC entered the room, looked at him and said, it's him again. He won't train him. He has enough money for now. He doesn't want to do anything today. The protagonist approached him and said he wanted to talk. The system notified him, and at the same time, it cancelled the class's stealth. The next second, Quincy dropped the Galanina pot, and it shattered. His face contorted with rage. He asked, is he a soul reaper? He gritted his teeth in anger and asked, how long has it been for a soul reaper to dare approach him? With these words, he concentrated energy in his hand and then unleashed a powerful volley, destroying all the barrels near him and sending several shards toward the protagonist. He dodged it easily, and Quincy thought, so fast. The next second, MC appeared in front of him and pointed his weapon at him. He asked, can they talk now? He asked, what do you want? The protagonist remembered Douglas's words. In the beginning, under the protection of the Lord of Darkness, The immortal world was mired in endless despair. To restore justice, Quincy and his wife fought the Lord of Darkness' most loyal supporter, and in this mortal battle, the Soul Reaper perished, but he cursed Quincy's wife while she was healing him. Her soul was consumed by darkness, she lost all her memories, and forever turned into a monster. And to lift the curse and save his wife, he had to suppress the darkness in her soul. But after the battle, Quincy could barely hold his sword. Everyone thought he would spend the rest of his life mourning his wife, but he announced a secret mission. Whoever saves his wife will receive his entire fortune, and the Soul Reaper will be able to break the sense of darkness, a miracle he received from the Dead Reaper. Quincy wanted to deceive those who wanted to receive the reward, save his wife, and make all the Reapers pay. But all 158 people who went on the mission still have not returned home. Then MC asked him to tell him about his mission. He closed his eyes and said, okay, since he asks, and he was expecting guests. He wanted to play a game with his beloved. At that moment, the system reported, Quincy's mission has been detected. Does he wish to participate? Mission name, Dead Wife's Soul. Mission content, free Quincy's wife, calm her soul. Time to complete, 10 days. Mission level, silver. The protagonist said that he accepted, and then he walked to the exit, and Quincy wished him luck. He could do it. He smiled and wondered if he could even crawl back here with any part of his body intact. Sometime later, in the north of the Duststone City, there was a monument to the fallen. MC walked down the corridor and used a night vision elixir. His zombie squad followed him, and then he stopped around the corner and thought, the monument to the fallen consists of 5 floors. All the NPCs of the Duststone City are buried here. At that moment, a zombie burst out of its coffin and ran at him, but a scorpion easily pierced it with its sting. The protagonist thought, besides, sometimes resurrected monsters appear here. Zombies, skeletons, and ghosts. The higher the floor, the higher the level of the monsters. The first floor usually has zombies of levels 1 to 3, the second, skeletons of levels 4 to 6, the third, ghosts of levels 7 to 9, and the fourth, 10 ghouls. The next second, they stopped near the portal, and the protagonist said, well, they should go straight to the 4th floor. Sometime later, on the 4th floor, the protagonist walked forward and said he heard some sounds up ahead. At that moment, a ghoul activated the wall walking skill, and several other ghouls activated the frozen tear skill. The system reported, Ghoul, Elite, levels 10, HP 2000, Attack 400, Defense 40, Skills Rot Infected Bite, Wall Walking, Frozen Tear. The ghoul approaching the protagonist activated the Rot Infected Bite skill. Then the protagonist shouted, come on. At that moment, his scorpion activated the Earth-Splitting Claw skill. He struck out in front of him, knocking a ghoul aside, then swung his tail, knocking back several more ghouls. The protagonist concentrated his energy around himself and rushed forward, shouting, strike. He struck the ghoul in front of him, then flew forward, shouting. The next second, he flew even further, attacking several ghouls at once, and, noticing the remaining one, who looked up at him, said that he almost forgot about him. With that, he stepped on his head. The system reported that his level had risen to 12. He looked at the monsters' bodies and thought that it was over even faster than he thought. It was a shame that the monster revival spell could only resurrect normal bodies, and it was completely useless against zombies. Then he felt energy behind him and turned sharply. A powerful beam of magical energy struck the wall, and MC, managing to jump aside, shouted, what? Damn it! The next second, the beam of energy finally absorbed him and transported him to another location. The protagonist skidded to a stop on the ground, then looked around, noticing a suspended capsule bound with chains. He asked, new location? The capsule contained a vengeful ghost. She laughed loudly, licked her lips, and said, finally, he has arrived. The next second, the capsule shattered into tiny pieces along with its chains. She froze in the air and said, fresh blood. The system reported, vengeful ghost, Lord, HP 6000, attack 800, defense 200, skill, death flower, succubus roar, body explosion. The protagonist thought this was the 5th floor. At that moment, the ghost rushed at him and shouted that she would tear him to pieces. He blocked her attack with his sword, and the system reported that the Death Flower skill had been activated. The next second, several tendrils from her legs slammed forward, but the protagonist dodged them and thought, poisonous acid? And then he said, such tactics are useless against him. With these words, he made several swings with his sword, severing the tendrils aimed at him. At that moment, the ghost screamed loudly, looking at him, and the system reported that the boss had activated the Succubus Roar skill. MC, trying to hold on, thought, area damage skill? No, she's summoning something. The roar continued to spread around, and then the protagonist frowned, looking to the side, and noticed a skeletal hand reaching forward. He wondered if these were the buried NPCs of the Duststone Hail. He noticed several more risen and thought, not just NPCs, but also players who failed Quincy's quests. He said, damn it. She wants to resurrect them? The undead continued to rise, and he said, it looks like there are even more skeletons behind that door. He didn't think this boss could only animate skeletons. Then he ordered his undead to move forward. He pointed to the side and ordered them to block that door. The kobolds followed his order, and he thought, let his army of the undead hold off the small fry first. Then he pointed forward and ordered the bloodlust status to be activated. The next second, the system reported, bloodlust status activated. The kobold's eyes lit up with rage, and the protagonist said, Kobold Chieftain, Thunder Scorpion, attack. They obeyed, and the system reported, Earth Cleaving Claw activated. The ground cracked, heading straight for the boss, and the chieftain activated the Crushing Strike skill. He struck forward, but the boss rose into the air, dodging it. Then she frowned and looked at the ceiling, noticing several rocks falling from above. She dodged to the side, and then sighed. MC looked at her and thought, ghosts are spiritual monsters. They can pass through objects, and they also have a university for physical attacks. Then he began concentrating energy around himself and said, but he can deal double physical damage. The next second, he directed his attack forward. Several skulls headed towards her, and he shouted that he would use the curse of the green soul and attack her. She began to circle around, and he thought that she had become much faster. NPCs could emerge from the tomb at any moment. He needed to end this quickly. Then he took out a ring and said that he needed to restrict her movement. The next second, he squeezed the ring in his hand, and the system reported, equipped, Ring of Paralysis. Ring of Paralysis, silver type jewelry effect, HP plus 10, magic plus 100, agility plus 15, intelligence plus 15, additional skill, Paralytic Toxin. Paralytic Toxin increases the chance of paralysis of the target for 3 seconds when attacking by 5%. The next second, the protagonist rushed forward and activated the additional skill, Paralytic Toxin. He struck, and the boss's body was paralyzed. The system reported that Paralytic Toxin was activated. Then MC swung his sword and said that that's not all. He directed an attack forward, knocking the boss aside. Then he slowed to a stop on the ground, and the ghost fell down. He said, not bad. As he thought, after just one blow of the curse of the green soul, her speed decreased. Then he extended his hand forward and shouted, Wolf Roar! The giant wolf activated the skill Wolf Roar. A sound wave spread around. The system reported that the target was stunned. The protagonist said, even if the effect only lasts for 5 seconds, that's enough for him. Then he swung his sword a few times and asked, I wonder how many hits she can take? Her HP began to plummet, and then she screamed loudly, and the system reported that the boss had activated the dead man's explosion skill. The next second, a powerful explosion really did thunder around, taking with it several members of the protagonist's army, and at that moment, he was holding on to his sword, trying to stay in place, and thought, Dead man's explosion. This creature wanted to blow up the NPC zombies to collapse the tomb. His zombie army had already shrunk by a third. That's serious. Then he said, it's time to finish her off. He charged forward and shouted that she must perish. She screamed back, no. At that moment, the system reported that the boss was almost defeated. 300 HP, 200 HP, 100 HP, 30 HP. Then she began to dissolve, and the system reported that he had killed the evil spirit and received 800 experience points. He walked forward and asked, is it all over? Then he turned around and noticed a ghost who looked at him and said she was grateful to him. You brave man. The next second, he extended his right hand forward, and an item appeared in his palm. The system reported, Beloved's Ring, the quest item, cannot be reset or sold. Note, Quincy gave this engagement ring to his wife as a symbol of love. The protagonist looked at it and thought, is that all? Then he noticed a book in front of him and asked in surprise, what is this? Yuan didn't know that the evil spirit skill, Dead Explosion, was only available to Soul Reapers. The system reported that these were the training requirements available to him. Perhaps because this ghost had been sealed by a loyal servant of the Dark King, the system also reported that the skill book was automatically loaded into the player's memory, and as the protagonist continued to hold the book in his palm, a multitude of bright beams appeared, illuminating the entire room. Suddenly, the system announced Dead Explosion, Gold. Level 1, Effect, Zombie Explosion, dealing 60% fire damage to nearby enemies when the player's health reaches 100%. Requirements, 100 mana, 10-second cooldown, 100 mastery. Yuan considered letting this skill exhaust his zombies. The damage and attack range were impressive, something he hadn't expected. Sometime later, in a dusty hail of stones, Quincy looked ahead, stunned, and wondered if this was the engagement ring he'd given her. A sealed soul has no memories, and only when released does it restore them and discard its most precious item. Let him tell. Did she die quickly? Was she in no pain? The protagonist agreed. Quincy held the ring in his hand and examined it carefully. He recalled her appearance and, with a trembling voice and tears in his eyes, replied that this was good. He never thought that one of the Soul Reapers he hated so much would grant his wish, and he would never forget their kindness. After these words, he bowed before the protagonist, and suddenly a box appeared in his hand. Now it was time for him to fulfill his promise. This box contained a special crown. The system reported it as the Crown of Darkness, a unique item. Its type is a helmet. Effect 1 conceals the level of sin. Effect 2 conceals the dark aura. Note that this unique Soul Reaper equipment cannot be sold or destroyed. Yuan examined the item and realized it was a Crown of Darkness. Although those were all the attributes it had, he needed it most of all right now, the ability to reveal the level of sin and dark aura. With this crown, he could defeat the Scorpion Tail Order and do anything he wanted in the main city. The system asked him if he wished to wear the Crown of Darkness. Yuan answered confidently, yes, after which magical rays appeared around his body, and he was finally one step closer to the truth. After some time, he arrived in Sandwind City. This city was home to many large and small guilds. Many people were shouting to join their guild just to see the leader do a backflip. Guild recruitment was underway right now. Let people join if they want to fight. There were invitations from many different guilds, but only from strong guilds. Yuan looked at the system window, which categorized all these guilds by number. There are only 10 of them, and maybe that man is hiding in one of these guilds? He is a simple newcomer who has entered the city of Sandy Winds. Joining one of these guilds will not be easy for him, and he must find a way to do so. While walking through the city, Yuan suddenly turned a corner and abruptly stamped his foot. The armored knight heard this unexpected sound in the silence, and his body shook. He stopped, and Yuan approached him closer, threatening him from behind with his sword and asking terrifyingly, "Who is he?" The young man was dumbfounded by what he heard and remained silent for a while, then finally spoke. He turned around abruptly and shouted with joy, "God, Yuan, it really is him." Qing reached out his hands to him, but since Yuan had stepped aside, he simply fell to the ground. Yuan asked again, "Is it him?" Qing addressed him as a god again, and was surprised that he remembered him. Yuan approached him closer and asked again, "Does he know his name?" Qing immediately stood up, pointed at himself, and shouted with joy that he recognized him on the guild stream. It seemed it was the Bloody Guild, and he had read 1,000 comments about him. Then he spent 2 million to improve the corporate facial recognition system to make sure it was really him. He was waiting for Yuan to praise him, when suddenly the protagonist asked, 2 million? You really spent that much money just to find him? Qing asked in surprise, "What? Is that really so much? The Han Corporation usually spends around 100 million on a single system test." The protagonist wondered, Han Corporation? So that's the IT company with a $1 trillion budget that provides the entire world with new technologies? This is his life. I wonder how much he knows. Maybe he should kill him right here? Suddenly, Qing shouted, "God Yuan, let him join forces with him. S-class representatives will be hunting in Bloodscale Cave tomorrow. People say someone has found a nest of iron-eating iguanas, and they only need..." Before he could finish his thought, he tripped over a rock and fell to the ground in front of the protagonist. The protagonist turned around and told him to leave and not follow him. Why should he coddle this idiot? Qing laughed and said he was right. A strong man like himself didn't need a team, as he could handle all the monsters alone. A third team from the Ebony Guild would be going on the hunt to find newcomers, and if he performed well, maybe they'd take him along. The protagonist glanced at the system window and saw that the Ebony Guild was in 10th place. Qing regretfully said that it looked like he'd have to try his luck alone. Suddenly, the protagonist asked again when the hunt would take place. Qing turned around joyfully and shouted, "What did he just say?" Yuan asked when the hunt would start, and Qing shouted back that it would start tomorrow at 8 in the morning, so he would participate. He ran even closer and raised his hands in joy again, when suddenly the protagonist covered his face with his hand and asked him to call him Ling Yuan. In any case, he needed to prepare first. After some time, a smoke screen could be seen in the air in the camp of the band of thieves and vultures. Suddenly, a bright fiery explosion occurred, and Yuan announced that the Lord should be standing ahead. Around him were numerous destroyed monsters, and he looked at the system window, which reported that they were zombies from the band of thieves and vultures. Level 12, health 1,600, attack 250, 70 defense, and skills such as throwing a sickle and resurrection. The protagonist was once again surrounded by a multitude of griffins, and he decided to engage. He clenched his fist, preparing for battle, when suddenly several more griffins burst onto the battlefield. Croaking loudly, Yuan extended his hand and confidently declared, "Attack." He used his magical powers and began the battle. The system reported that he had activated his sickle throwing skill, and his sickle flew toward his enemies, hitting the ground and shattering them into pieces. One of the griffins opened its mouth in surprise, distracting him, and the protagonist, standing behind him, struck the creature with his sword. He shouted that he would take their lives, and the system reported that he had destroyed the leader of the gang of thieves and 3 griffins, immediately followed by 3 more, bringing the total to 10 griffins destroyed. When he stopped, he looked questioningly at the throne in front of him. He realized that the lead griffin had disappeared. The system reported that the leader of the gang of thieves and vultures was a level 19 lord, whose health is 6,200, attack 820, defense 220, and skills including sickle throw, stealth, and backstab. Backstab had just been activated. The protagonist realized this, and using his powers, activated the dead man's explosion skill, then shouted at the monsters to die now. Magical green beams erupted from his eyes, and moments later, an explosion rumbled across the entire area, easily eliminating his opponents. After such an explosion, one of the griffins screamed loudly, and the protagonist abruptly moved, aiming for another of his opponents. He used his shadow gloves to strike the griffin straight in the chest, and shouted that he would send it straight to hell. A moment later, several more bright explosions of light thundered, and the system reported that he had finally killed the lord of the gang of thieves and vultures. Now it was all over, and the system congratulated him on leveling up to 13. Dark Curse, a level 3 gold item, deals 20% damage and restores 20% of the zombie's health to the enemy. It requires 60 mana and has a 60-second cooldown. And Dead Explosion, a level 2 gold item, explodes the zombie and deals fire damage, destroying 80% of its health. It requires 100 mana, has a 10-second cooldown, and has a mastery rating of 2 out of 100. After carefully examining this system window, the protagonist stood motionless for a moment. The system asked him if he wanted to use the skill upgrade. He confidently answered yes, after which he assumed a thoughtful stance and said the effect was quite good. He then used a skill enhancement scroll to increase the level of Dark Curse, and now he's raised it to level 3, and also improved the corpse explosion. The zombie army is sufficient for now. They've acquired 130 zombies. A zombie leader of a gang of thieves and vultures, level 15, 3,500 health, 500 attack, 100 defense. Skills, Heart Throw, Stealth, Resurrection, appeared in front of him again. After which, a zombie leader of a gang of thieves and vultures arrived. Level 19. 6,200 health, 820 attack, 220 defense, and the skills Sickle Throw, Stealth, Resurrection, and Poisonous Claws. Poisonous Claws inflict an additional 20 points of poison damage. When the protagonist carefully examined the system, he realized he'd resurrected the leader of a gang of thieves and vultures. Does this have an additional skill? When he resurrected the giant Death Wolf, he also gained the additional skill Resurrection Fury. Could resurrecting an Island Lord class grant them another skill? He found the thought quite intriguing, and the system announced that the hunt began in 2 hours. A smile appeared on his face, and he decided it was time to get ready. After some time, a loud sound was heard in the Bloodscale cave. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in front of the protagonist, causing him to cover his face with his hand and ask if he was cosplaying as a Golden Knight statue. Ching replied that he spent 50 gold coins and hired a blacksmith to create this super powerful equipment. Let him rest assured that he wouldn't let him down today. Suddenly, his belt broke, and his pants immediately fell off his legs. The protagonist closed his eyes in shame, and Ching was silent for a moment in surprise. After that, Yuan remarked that this was the first time he'd seen separate equipment. It was quite unusual. Confused, Ching replied that the blacksmith had said it was the latest design. He accidentally covered his face with his helmet, then began screaming that he couldn't see and begging for help. Yuan watched silently, when suddenly Ching tripped over the protagonist's foot, and with a loud cry began to fall. Suddenly, he bumped into someone else's armor and heard a click. When he looked up, he wondered what was going on. A tall, enormous man appeared in front of him, glaring at him. He smiled and asked, "Are you hurt?" It was Kui, and the system reported that he was from the Ebony Guild, the leader of the 3rd team, a warrior class, and level 15. When Ching saw him, he panicked and wondered what was going on. He was smiling, but why did he feel like an angry snake was staring at him? Was it all his imagination? Suddenly, the protagonist grabbed him by the armor and pulled him toward himself. He asked, "Would you like to take off this stupid armor already?" Ching responded by scratching the back of his head, precisely, and grinned. Kui looked at them in bewilderment and smiled slightly, when suddenly the protagonist noticed his gaze and became wary. Kui angrily wondered in his mind, what was going on? How dare this little idiot stare at him? How it irritated him. Suddenly, someone shouted at them. Which one of them was Han Ching? The man compared the documents and the photo, pointed a finger at Ching, and then started shouting, "Is that him? Why does he look so weird?" The entire team started laughing loudly at this ugliness. They laughed at this glittering gold and asked if Ching was really at some super cool cosplay show or something. He waved and replied, "Yes, it's him, the scary-looking guy. The 3 of them are big brothers from the Ebony Guild, right? By the way, he wants to say hello to his friend." The leader approached him and began threatening him with the point of his sword, then said that was enough. They didn't care what the newcomers were called. They should remember that they were allowed to bring someone not because of double taxation, but because of their captain's generosity. Yuan frowned and remained silent. Kuai asked them what they were doing. They needed to instill respect for their new friends. He replied that he was just joking about this captain. After these words, he put away his sword and said that, after all, they shouldn't confess just because their captain was so generous with kind words. They should accept this opportunity with gratitude. Did they understand? Ching nodded his head several times and replied that they would do everything in their power. One of the crew members clapped his hands and shouted for everyone to return to their places and that they would now begin roll call. Andre was incredibly nervous and never imagined working with members of the main guild. Yuan wondered if these players were participating in S-rank hunts. The teammate hoped the battle wouldn't let him down mid-raid, and Yuan wondered if he thought they were all newcomers who had just arrived in the main city. The captain entered the cave first and said that since everyone was there, they didn't have time, so they should prepare quickly. They also shouldn't worry, because even death would retreat upon seeing the Blackwood Guild, so they were safe. The rest of the guild began shouting their agreement and followed their captain. Suddenly, one of the guys turned to Ching, who was holding a red flag. He picked it up and started waving the flag, telling Yuan to keep up. He'd heard there were slime monsters hiding in this cave. The boy turned around and wondered if Ching was really going on a picnic. The protagonist silently followed the team and suddenly smiled, catching a whiff of that disgusting smell. After a while, they wandered into the Bloodscale cave and found themselves near a fork in the road. They hadn't encountered any ironbiters yet, but that's to be expected, as they are active at night and hide during the day, so they were most likely hidden deep in the cave. One of the team members asked the captain which route he thought they should take. He smiled and replied that it would be better for them to split up now. The guys became frightened and began asking with stunned expressions, should they really split up? But isn't that dangerous? What would happen if they suddenly encountered a level 16 elite monster? One of the guys asked everyone to remain calm. In fact, to make sure they were safe, their captain had already checked the cave when they arrived. They had already explored everything and were resting before the meeting. One of the knights asked again, what? Had their captain really checked everything in advance? Kai smiled and replied that that was true, and given their inner strength, the middle path was clear, and the pheromones of iron gnaws were present, so it was dangerous to go there, while the other paths were safe. But the more dangerous the place, the higher the chance of finding something valuable. So to find a balance between usefulness and safety, he decided that his guild would take the middle path, and the others would take both sides. What did they think of this? The guys began to reply that it was no wonder they were considered the main guild. After all, they were so cautious. He was the third captain in the Ebony Guild, and his level was higher than theirs, so his word was law. The protagonist raised a finger and announced that they would take the left path. Kui immediately turned around and repeated the phrase, they would take the left path. The boys agreed with him, and one of them wondered who would go with them. Who would go with Ching and Yuan? The boys were discussing among themselves that one of them was wearing something strange, which made him seem reliable, while Yuan was quite handsome. They were arguing over who he should stay with, and Kui suggested that they go alone. Unfortunately, even though he was the head captain, he couldn't force anyone to join them. Yuan turned to Ching and said that they should go. They set off together, and the captain looked after them, smiled and said, what idiots. Sometime later, water began dripping from the ceiling of the cave. Ching turned to Yuan and said that it was getting colder and colder in here, so he thought something was wrong. He also felt like someone was watching him, and the feeling was growing stronger with each passing second. Yuan asked again, had he finally noticed it? There was definitely something here. Ching turned around and shouted, what? But Captain Kui said he'd checked everything was safe here. Yuan turned around and asked with a smile, does he really trust him that much? This was an S-rank hunt, but there were too many newcomers here, and they were obviously using people as bait to test these trails. Ching asked again, then why him? But before he could finish his thought, the protagonist suddenly finished the question for him. Why didn't he give them away? Suddenly, he grabbed one of the slimes on the cave wall in his hand and threw it far away. Yuan said it was just a coincidence that he wanted to find out too. Suddenly, the guys stopped and heard a loud sound coming from a dark place in the cave. He realized that they could find a lot of things here. At the end of the cave, the bright red eyes of some creatures appeared. The system reported that they were ironbiters, elite class, level 16, 3,300 health, 4,400 attack, 100 defense. Skills: Iron-Tail Strike, Rusty Shield. The ironbiters extended their tongues and crawled toward their opponents. Suddenly, one of the team members slammed his sword into the ground and shouted that they would burn instantly. Everything around them lit up with bright flames, and the monsters found themselves in the midst of these rays. Suddenly, one of the monsters was stabbed in the stomach with a sword, cutting it in half. The boy screamed for a taste of its power. Another team member turned to the captain and said that their sacrifice attracts monsters and weakens their strength, making everything much easier. He couldn't believe it. Did they really believe him so easily? He laughed at this guess, and Kui continued to say that when most of the newcomers died, the monsters in the other caves would also be on the verge of death, and then they would collect all the rewards, double their winnings, and hardly have to put in any effort. Meanwhile, Ching, frowning in fear, wondered, unbridled monsters, who are they yelling at? The system reported that the Iron-Tail Strike skill had been activated. Iron-Tail Strike uses a metal strike, dealing damage equal to the target's attack power, a certain percentage, but it's not visible. The Scimitar Throw skill had been activated. It throws the weapon at the target, with a maximum range of 10 meters. The weapon can be retrieved, dealing damage equal to 60% attack power to the target. The Stealth skill had also been activated, making him half invisible, reducing the chance of being detected by the target. Also, the Backstab skill had been activated, meaning it attacks from behind, dealing damage equal to 80% attack power to the target. Ching started screaming. When did he manage to summon zombies? This was even better than the previous battle in the swamp. In his opinion, it was simply incredible. Yuan asked again. He didn't say he wanted to prepare, did he? Ching started screaming. What? He summoned all these monsters in less than a day? The system reported that he destroyed all 55 elite ironbiters. The protagonist said they'd done well, and Ching began to feel envious and wonder when he'd become as strong as him. Suddenly, He heard strange sounds and wondered if it was an earthquake. He shouted Yuan's name in fear, but suddenly realized he was busy and should check for himself. He didn't want to disturb him for any reason. He needed to be useful too. When Andre turned around, he thought the sound seemed to be coming from that dark side of the cave, but suddenly stopped and wondered if the ground was shaking anymore. Suddenly, a huge ivy burst from the ground, sending Andre flying to the side, where he looked at the scene in shock. The monster's enormous tongue began to dangle everywhere, and Qing wondered what was going on. He tried to defend himself and prepared for battle, when suddenly the ivy began to push him back, and he fell to the ground and began screaming for help. The ivy eventually grabbed his entire body and lifted him into the air, causing Qing to scream in fear. But suddenly, he saw a bright green beam of light before him. With a single movement, the protagonist chopped the ivy into several pieces and declared that it was simply some kind of beast hiding in the bowels of the earth, devouring dirt. How dare he perform his tricks without it? The monster's blood spilled, and Yuan grabbed Qing by the clothes and dragged him along. When they were a safe distance away, Qing cleared his throat and, shouting the protagonist's name, declared that this huge thing was definitely a monster and they needed to get away from here quickly. But suddenly the entire earth began to crack into huge chunks, and Andre realized it was too late. The monster appeared right in front of them and began to roar loudly. This was boss, level 20, health 6,300, attack 850, defense 280. Skills: Iron Tail Strike, Impenetrable Fortress, Earth Vein Penetration, Poisonous Sand Vortex. Yuan and Qing stood there for a while, watching the monster's movements in bewilderment, when suddenly Qing began to shake and said, "The quest said that an iron-biting iguana lives in the molten blood scale cave. But this is the boss." He apologized to Yuan, because if it weren't for him, Yuan wouldn't have found himself in such a terrible situation. He wanted to detain this monster and tell Yuan to run away. Yuan smiled and asked again, "Is this really a terrible monster in his opinion? It's just his prey." Qing's eyes widened in surprise and he asked again, "What did he just say?" The monster began to rapidly approach them, when suddenly the protagonist launched himself off the ground and shouted for the beast to prepare for its demise. Qing shouted his name after him, but the protagonist heard nothing and began to destroy his opponent, using agility and all his skills. He threw a spinning blade toward the monster, and the system reported that the boss had activated the Iron Tail Strike skill. Thanks to his Iron Tail, he absorbed all the attacks with his tail, and the protagonist realized the monster was cheating. At that moment, he used a heavenly spiritual seal, and the entire room was illuminated by bright green flashes of light. Yuan landed and carefully looked at the monster, which was still conscious and continued to fight. Yuan wondered if the monster had suffered additional significant burns from his strike. He began to roar loudly and activated the Poisonous Seal Whirlwind skill, which deals poisonous sand damage and, on impact, deals poison damage, taking 3 to 10% of maximum health every second. The skill lasts for 5 seconds. The monster opened its mouth and unleashed magical powers, causing a huge flash of light to appear above the protagonist. Qing screamed in fear for Yuan to protect himself and avoid the attack. A moment later, Yuan managed to shift back, and a huge pit formed in his previous position, emitting smoke from the monster's magical powers. This was a very hostile environment, and he found it much more difficult than he thought. Suddenly, the monster's iron tail appeared above his head, and he managed to jump to the side, shouting that he found the fight much more interesting this way. He ordered the Eagle Lord to rise, when suddenly the monster began fighting in his stead, roaring loudly. A serious battle broke out between the two monsters, and Qing wondered in surprise, could the undead creature Yuan had summoned really be his new follower? He was so majestic. The system reported that the monster was activating the Backstab skill, and the boss was activating the Impenetrable Fortress skill, which increased defense by 150% for 10 seconds. The monster managed to strike the enemy, but the creature used its iron tail again, and the protagonist shouted at his subordinate to be careful. It attacked his monster, and Qing shouted, "What a quick reaction. Could this monster really have eyes on its back?" The protagonist wondered. Eyes on its back? He tried to recall everything that had happened before, and realized that lizards have simple eye structures and navigate by changes in light. As soon as an enemy stops moving, it's difficult for them to notice, but they detect movement instantly, and their hearing and sense of smell can detect even the most careful enemy movements. In fact, some lizards have infrared senses that they use to detect the heat emitted by an enemy's body. Because of this, lizards are much more sensitive to enemy movement than humans. It seemed he'd have to trap this thing to deal with it. The protagonist dealt several blows to the lizard from various directions, then shouted for it to come here and see which was stronger, this monster's scales or his fireballs. The monster began to roar loudly, when the protagonist suddenly turned and ran in the other direction. He realized everything was going well and he needed to focus the monster's attention on him. Qing began shouting that this was extremely dangerous, as the iguana's defense was too powerful. Fireballs wouldn't do anything, and it was too much of a risk. He suddenly realized Yuan was running toward the dead, and was stunned by what was happening. As Yuan approached the monsters, he smiled and realized that he would do everything now. He stopped abruptly, as the iguana suddenly found itself trapped around these monsters, trying to fight them off. The protagonist wondered if this stupid monster even knew how to stop. The iguana began to roar loudly and opened its wide mouth completely. Yuan told it to enjoy their explosive feast, and the system announced that he was activating the corpse explosion art skill. Suddenly, there was a loud crack, and rocks began raining down everywhere. The protagonist realized the armor had been breached, and a moment later, the iguana roared even louder and began to fall to the ground. Suddenly, Yuan kicked off and leaped high into the air, shouting, "Lord of the Eagles," to the left. He moved incredibly quickly across the huge rocks and realized that this lizard had another weak spot. It couldn't see enemies to the right and left at the same time. The iguana came right up to him when suddenly the eagles began striking from behind the creature. The iguana growled loudly in pain, and a multitude of bright beams appeared throughout the room. This blow would send the iguana straight to hell. Yuan aimed for the iguana's weak spot, and a moment later, the system announced that his level had been raised and congratulated him on reaching level 14. The iguana was completely destroyed, and smoke emanated from its body. 5 minutes later, the system reported that his health had been restored to 85%. The Dark Curse skill, Gold, level 3, deals 20% damage to an enemy's health or restores 20% of the health of a dead person. Requirements: 60 mana, a 6-second cooldown, and a mastery of 200 out of 300. The protagonist surmised that if he used this skill, he could raise the Dark Curse to level 4, and even though the art of corpse explosion had invented many undead, it was worth it. The system reported again. Lord of the Dead, Iguana Ironbiter, level 20, health 6,300, attack 850, defense 280. Skills: Irontail Strike, Impenetrable Fortress, Earth Vein Penetration, Toxic Sand Vortex, and the corpse's body. From now on, this creature will be his shield. A moment later, Qing was so overjoyed that he shouted that this was the first time he'd seen so much loot appear in their hands. So are they gonna start counting it now? Yuan, with a disgruntled expression, asked again why they needed to rush. They still had to kill a couple of rats. Meanwhile, the commander's team had also had a successful battle, leaving a thick layer of smoke in the cave from the destroyed enemies. Kui grabbed the chain and, smirking, declared that those idiots weren't even worth his attention. One of his subordinates chuckled and said it was all thanks to their leader's wise orders. Even if a Lord-class monster appeared here, he wouldn't give it a chance. Judging by past experience, that battle was almost over, and they should go reap the fruits of their labor. They rushed toward the exit as it was time to collect the corpses. At that moment, a bright light appeared behind them, and a multitude of stones flew everywhere. The captain turned around, and everyone on the team began to defend themselves from the blows, which so far had only struck the ground. The captain began to shout, "Who's there? How dare he ambush the Ebony Guild?" Yuan and Qing appeared across from them amid thick smoke. Yuan asked who wanted to collect the corpses. Maybe they could do it themselves. One of the team members shouted that it was impossible. They had to be destroyed by a whole bunch of iron-biting iguanas. Qing yelled back, saying how impudent he was. It was simply disgraceful. He thought the Ebony Guild deserved respect, being honest and strong, but he'd never imagined they were using players as bait to clear a dungeon. Another team member asked, "So what? Being the foundation stone for the Ebony Guild's glory is an honor for idiots like them." The captain was dumbfounded, completely unable to comprehend how they'd managed to survive. Hadn't there been a ton of iguanas in that cave, and all the monsters gathered around those other unfortunate freaks? Qing yelled back that they had absolutely no shame. Kui thought this guy was a bit strange to him, because the more he looked at him, the angrier he got, and they'd better get rid of him. He didn't know what incredible luck had been on their side or why they'd survived, but their lucky streak was over. With these words, he decided to pounce on the guys, and the protagonist shouted that they should retreat. Did he really want to kill them alone? The captain continued to wave his weapon, and the protagonist began to defend himself and suddenly stopped. The captain asked again, "What was that? Was this some kind of childish trick?" The protagonist used his spell and directed the skeletons' heads towards their opponents, especially the captain. Kui found himself in front of the smoke screen and, looking around, wondered where he had gone. Yuan appeared from behind and suddenly decided to pounce on him, asking, "Did he really think it was that obvious? He was just an idiot." The captain said that experience had shown him that those who live by luck alone must always be on guard. Suddenly, he vanished from the spot, and Yuan looked questioningly ahead. He found himself completely alone and didn't understand what was happening, when suddenly the captain appeared behind him and, with a terrifying expression, said that eventually, these useless freaks would die. He attempted to strike Yuan, causing a bright beam of light to illuminate the entire area. Qing shouted Yuan's name in fear, and one of the guild members told him he was their newcomer. Hadn't he had enough of a warm-up? Now it was his turn. Qing backed away, while the captain who had knocked the protagonist down said, "Excellent. He doesn't have time to mess around with him. Now he should accept his death." He lunged at the protagonist, clenching his fist, but suddenly paused and, dumbfounded, asked, "What's going on?" Yuan asked again. "He's the leader of the third team of the Ebony Guild, isn't he?" The captain wondered how he'd managed to escape. Yuan smiled and said in a terrifying voice that he thought he now understood the true level of guild improvement in the main city. Yuan stopped his attack by grabbing the captain's arm. His hand trembled, and he cried out in pain. Yuan's eyes glowed with a bright magical light, and a moment later, he threw the captain far away. He shattered several rocks, fell to the ground, and, coughing, muttered that he was a freak, that he had underestimated him. They shouldn't stand there like pillars. Help him. His subordinates shouted that they would do everything now, and the three of them pounced on Yuan, who smiled and said, "It turns out they were just a bunch of idiots, and there was nothing interesting about them." A moment later, he shifted distance and, using his powers, summoned eagles, which grabbed each of the guild members in their claws. The captain realized several skeletal heads were heading his way, and he froze in terror, only to be attacked and scream in pain. He fell face first onto the ground, but suddenly heard approaching footsteps and looked up. He asked Yuan to wait, because if he killed him, the Ebony Guild would give him no peace, and he should think about it carefully. At that moment, Yuan glanced to the side at Qing, who was hugging his leg and looking at him with a loving expression. He said he knew he was invincible. He almost died for him. Yuan pushed Qing away and told him to get out of here, then raised his sword high, and said that, as far as he knew, their Ebony Guild was not only arrogant towards outsiders, but also harsh towards their own friends. If he died and lost his level and weapon, they would begin interrogating him. How would he explain this to them? The captain admitted defeat, and asked what he needed to do to make them leave him alone. Yuan replied that he needed to give him a list of high-ranking players in their guild, specifying their classes, levels, and attributes. In his past life, the first follower used strange and incomprehensible skills, and no one knew how to counter him. So this guy has a very rare hidden class. He still doesn't know who he really is. The captain wondered why he needed this list. Yuan struck him in the hand with his sword and screamed in pain, after which the protagonist asked, "So, will he write this or not?" His hand was covered in blood, and he screamed in pain that he would do it now. A moment later, the list was written, and the protagonist took the document in his hands. So, these are all the experts of the Ebony Guild. There are a couple of special classes here, but none of this matches the attributes of the first follower. The captain asked, "Master, can they go from here?" Yuan turned, smiled at them, and said he could let them go, after which the boys began to thank him, when suddenly he directed bright magical beams at them, attacking them, and shouted that they had harmed many innocent players and must explain why. The system reported that he had received the Moonwash Devil's Hammer, a silver weapon type with an attack power boost of 45, critical strike boost of 30, and attack boost of 30. The Moonwashed Hammer's accumulated energy release skill increases first attack speed by 20%. He also received the Berserker Blade Dance, a bronze weapon type with an attack boost of 30 and accuracy boost of 20. Yuan also received the Bronze Future Light Equipment, a sleep-type item with a magic damage boost and spiritual power boost of 20. Yuan looked around and noticed Qing picking up a chest and asking him to examine it carefully. There was also treasure here that they hadn't yet opened. He replied, "Fine, he'll choose first, and the rest will be his." Qing replied that that wasn't right. He'd rather buy everything since he couldn't do that. Yuan replied that he could do as he pleased. He didn't need anything here and should take it. Qing replied, "Okay, he'll transfer all the money right away." Sometime later, 54 gold coins were transferred to him. When they emerged from the cave of molten red scales, the protagonist realized that, as he'd thought, it was all just silver equipment. In the current version of the game, obtaining gold equipment was very difficult. Qing approached him and said he knew something, and Yuan asked him again, what was he talking about? He replied that he'd heard that the Ebony Guild was very vindictive. If they lost in the game, they took revenge on players in real life. Perhaps he should order his bodyguards to accompany him? He waved his hand and replied, "Thanks for the warning. They're just disgusting insects, and he knows how to deal with them." After a while, Yuan removed his helmet and went to eat. He stood up from his computer desk and walked to the door, but as soon as he opened it, an incredibly tall, intimidating man appeared in front of him. This made him tense up a little. The father took off his helmet and asked if it was the same one he was wearing. Was it broken? The protagonist replied that it worked. Everything was fine. But why did he buy this helmet? He asked what he did with it. His mother found it while cleaning Lintan's room. MC wondered if in her past life, around this time, she had awakened her hidden class. Then mother came up to them and said, "Why are they standing here?" It was time for them to eat. During the meal, she said that his father didn't understand anything about this technology. He just wanted to find a common topic of conversation. He spent the whole day with this helmet and couldn't even turn it on. The father replied that it was wrong. He was just worried that she had damaged some of his things while cleaning, so he just checked. The protagonist thought that if he involved his parents in the infinite world, he could repay them with in-game resources, and when the cataclysm happens, they'll be able to protect themselves. He pointed out that it wasn't a difficult game. He'll buy them 2 more helmets. Mom should try it too. The woman replied that he shouldn't waste money. MC said everything was fine. Not to worry. By the way, has Lintan returned yet? She picked up the phone and replied that it was Friday. She was probably with friends. Let him eat first. He picked up the phone and said he'd call her. When he rang, the answering machine said the number couldn't answer right now. The protagonist thought that even if she didn't want to answer, she would have sent a message and not ignored him. Mom pointed out that he should eat first. She was probably eating with friends, so they wouldn't wait for her. He got up from his chair and said that they should eat for now. he'll buy something. He's afraid the store will close. The woman, perplexed, noted that the food was getting cold. Dad said, let him go. Does she remember how he and Linton were always clinging to each other? He won't understand when they managed to drift apart so much. Let them talk more. Mom agreed and noted that Yuan isn't very good at expressing emotions, but he is her older brother after all. The protagonist remembered how in his past life his sister returned home with bruises. He asked what happened. She walked past him and sternly replied that it was none of his business. He shouldn't call the police or tell their parents. Currently, the MC is thinking that in her past life, after Linton started playing the Infinite World, she quickly awakened the hidden class, but also encountered many problems she shouldn't have to deal with. It all started when that strange organization came, the System Organization. It's a mysterious group founded by 9 chosen ones, and only they can join the system. Among them is a prophet who can sense the chosen ones in real life. He dispatches members of the organization to invite the chosen few into the system. With terrifying speed, the power of the organization system becomes simply invincible. And not only that, their influence in the real world is also growing. Although their actions are mysterious and unpredictable, they have achieved stability in society, making their actions even more difficult to understand. After little Linton joined them, she often carried out dangerous missions, but never told the organization home about it. He hopes it's not their fault, but even if it is, this time he won't let her fall into this ignorance again. After some time, MC went outside and started looking for his sister. Suddenly, he found her sitting with a representative of the organization's system in a local cafe. The protagonist hid behind a wall and thought that everything was as he thought. Little Linton had already met them, but they were too far away. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he couldn't arouse suspicion. He hadn't used this in a long time. He needed to concentrate. He used the stealth skill and, becoming invisible, entered the building. The protagonist reflected that his stealth skill was now level 3. The effect would last for 5 minutes, but that should be enough. At that moment, 2 men were sitting at the same table with Linton. Hao Cheng, the organization's representative, noted with a serious expression that he had already said everything. Whether it was true or not was for her to decide. She could join them not only for the good of the organization. After all, when the catastrophe befalls them in 3 years, she will become like them. She will protect this world. Xiaopan noted with a smile that he had frightened the poor girl. He should change his tone to a more friendly one. Hao Cheng exclaimed that he was talking about serious things, and it was just as important to her. Suddenly, he sensed the protagonist's presence and used the dispel skill with his magic ring. A system window appeared, notifying that the stealth effect would be removed in 3 seconds. The protagonist immediately ran to hide behind the wall. Hao Cheng called out to the cafe owner and asked if he had any iced tea. Why didn't he just say so? Tell him to pour another cup, but take it with him. The MC, hiding, thought he'd use the dispel skill associated with the ring. Luckily, he had 3 seconds to hide. The guy, taking a sip of his drink, handed her his business card and hoped she'd think twice about joining them. A righteous man wouldn't sit idly by in the face of disaster. When she made her decision, tell her to call the number provided. Linton took the card and agreed. After that, they stood up and headed for the exit. Xiaopan smiled and remarked that they'd be waiting. She should definitely come. When they left, the protagonist used the stealth skill again and followed them. Upon reaching the street, he saw no one and asked in confusion, "Have they disappeared?" Suddenly, Hao Cheng threw a glass of drink at his feet and exclaimed that, as he thought, something was wrong. He had vanished in the last seconds before the skill deactivated. The boy approached the glass and said that perhaps he was being too cautious, but everything was fine. Xiaopan replied that he was too tense. He should relax already. By the way, do you think she'll join them? He replied that according to the clairvoyant's prophecy, she would come sooner or later. The boy agreed and added that the clairvoyant had never been wrong. However, he was more interested in which girl he would spend the rest of his life with. Hao Cheng said that he should first survive the catastrophe, and then they could talk. Xiaopan replied that that was still a long way off. Meanwhile, the protagonist, climbing a tree and observing them, began to think that they were stronger than he thought. If he had spent a little more time with them, he would have been discovered by now. There's no place for him in the endless world. He needs to be more careful, and it's time to go. After a while, Linton, holding a business card, bumped into her brother and asked, perplexed, what he was doing there. He, holding a bag, replied that he went out to buy something. She hadn't eaten yet, had she? It was late. She shouldn't make her mother worry even more. He bought her something to eat. Let her look, and maybe she'll want something. MC started walking, thinking that she was still a child. She couldn't even take care of herself yet. After a while, they arrived home. Mom remarked that she was completely losing track of time with her friends. Had she even eaten there? She could warm something up for her. The girl replied that that wasn't necessary. She'd better go and lie down. The mother turned to the protagonist and noted that he hadn't eaten anything either. She would cook them something. Meanwhile, Linton entered her room, lay down on her bed, and noticed that strange things had begun to happen to her as soon as she started playing the game. She remembered fighting giant mantises with Xiao He in the game world. She called out to her and told her to run. She'd distract the monsters. Suddenly, a mantis pounced and began attacking her. Linton shouted, "Let her go first. She'll hold them off." She was on the front lines. How could she leave them and run? Let her do it. She charged and began to fend off the monster's attacks. Suddenly, one of the mantises appeared behind her and dealt a powerful blow. A system window appeared, notifying her that she had activated a hidden ability. Lin Tan abruptly launched an attack on several monsters at once and was finally able to fight them off. After moving away from them, she used the Blade of Dawn skill. At this point, she began to wonder if this feeling was real. She felt her body change in the real world. So if something terrible really happened, as Hao Chen said, she would be able to protect everyone? Could she really do that? But even if this power couldn't stop the nightmare, would the others survive? Lin Tan looked at the photo of her family and thought, whether she would join them or not, she had to get stronger as soon as possible. She wants to protect them. Meanwhile, MC, sitting in his room, also looked at the photo of the family and thought about how they needed to move to a new house. He had to concentrate on the game, so he couldn't be constantly on guard. It was time for him to make their lives better. Sometime later, he went to the real estate agency. The consultant greeted him and asked if he'd come to see the house. The protagonist inquired if they had any fancier villas. He needed a house with high security. She wondered why he looked so young. Did he really have that kind of money? The woman asked if he'd looked at the prices for this complex. It would still be expensive. The protagonist pulled out his bank card and replied that he hadn't looked, but thought it would be enough. The consultant took the card and exclaimed delightedly that it was a unique VIP card that required a minimum investment of tens of millions. What kind of god of wealth is he? Employee number 2345 serves him with all sincerity. Sometime later, the MC met his parents in front of the new villa. His mother, perplexed, asked if she'd heard him correctly. He said this was their new home. There's even a private pool? It's just like on TV. The father walked inside and, entering the bedroom, asked in surprise, "Is there such a big bed in here?" They walked around the house a bit and met in the living room. The woman, shocked, asked how much he'd have to pay for such a house. Maybe they should return everything? The father pointed out that his mother was right. They didn't want to put so much pressure on him. MC replied that there was no mortgage. He bought the house with cash he'd earned from previous competitions. Let them live in peace. He'd live nearby so he could concentrate on the game. He said in surprise that he never thought he'd live in such a house. And it's all thanks to his son. The mother smiled and remarked that their son had grown up so quickly. Sometime later, the protagonist, while behind the grocery store, thought that the villa's security was clearly quite good. Now he needed to get his parents involved in the game so they'd be more careful and disobey orders. Suddenly, a gang of people armed with bladed weapons appeared on his path. Kui smiled and remarked that they'd been waiting for him for a long time. He wasn't easy to find. The MC wondered if this was the leader of the Ebony Guild. Suddenly, the bald man began to attack him, shouting that he was such a good fighter, so he should pretend in real life too. The rest of the gang followed suit. One of them leaped forward and exclaimed that anyone who dared insult the master was doomed to death. The protagonist, with a sly smile, used the stealth skill and remarked that it was too slow. An instant later, he attacked Kui from above with a powerful blow. After that, he quickly killed everyone else and, picking up a stick, said that he apparently didn't value life at all. The protagonist thought that these persistent leeches would never go away. Kui, horrified, shouted that he was wrong. Let him spare him and not kill him. He could be useful to him. He knew a hidden quest. The MC replied, "Let him continue." The bald man said fearfully, telling him to find a blacksmith named Huo Xian in the main city. Then he needed to continue the quest to deliver minerals, and when his positive attitude reached the required level, he'd make him golden armor. He thought about how someone in his past life had actually gotten golden armor quickly. People said it was connected to a secret NPC. Perhaps he was telling the truth. The protagonist angrily clutched his stick and said he hoped he'd stop acting like such a jerk. He had many ways to deal with him, both here and in the game. If he dared touch his family, he'd suffer the same fate as that stick. Kui, horrified, replied that he understood. Sometime later, in the main city of the Western Desert, specifically the Moonlit Night Tavern, the protagonist approached Huo Xian, who was drinking alcohol. The old man immediately asked if he could bring him 100 minerals. He shouldn't mess with him. He looks neat and clean, so he clearly doesn't work in the mines. But if he's not lying, he'll make him a free weapon. MC thought that Kui probably wasn't lying. It was time for him to go to the mines. At that moment, Matilda was about to leave the tavern when a guy grabbed her arm and asked where she was going. He offered her a drink. She replied she didn't even know him, so he shouldn't touch her. He ignored her and told her to come with him. He promised he wouldn't hurt her. The guy noticed the protagonist's gaze and furiously exclaimed, "What is he looking at?" He'd rip his eyes out. In response, he neutralized him with one blow and replied that he was an insolent man who didn't value his own life. Matilda admiringly said that he was handsome. She thanked him and asked if she could have a drink with him. The protagonist walked past her and replied that she shouldn't. She caught up with him and told him not to run away. Suddenly, the girl tripped and started to fall, but he instantly caught her, as if dancing. Matilda smiled and remarked that he loved dancing. She loved it too. She fell asleep immediately afterward. Sometime later, MC put her to bed in one of the tavern's rooms and headed into the mine. Upon arrival, he looked at the giant wolves and thought about the 12 rebellious dogmen at his gates to the underworld. They were perfect for collecting minerals, so he needed to gather as many as possible and quickly. Suddenly, Enraged moles began attacking. The protagonist ordered his subordinates to attack and summoned a huge scorpion, which immediately pacified all the beasts. Afterward, he began to drain their strength and noted that the more monsters he collected, the more powerful his tactics would become. Just as the protagonist subdued the little moles, a powerful explosion erupted, and an enraged mole boss rushed toward him. The protagonist grabbed his sword and exclaimed, "Is that the mine boss? Someone's clearly luring out the monsters." A reaper appeared alongside the boss and immediately began attacking him with his staff. MC dodged the magic projectile, but it flew right after him and he wondered in disbelief. Is that a target lock skill? A system window appeared, stating that last year's Sun had activated the Holy Shield Art skill against him. Holy Shield Art increases the target's defense by 20 points and lasts for 60 seconds. He exclaimed, "It's a boost from the Reaper." One of the nearby players asked in confusion, "What's going on? Where did the iron ore go?" He saw the mage and asked, "Is that the Reaper from the Iron Triangle? Why is he alone? He'll quickly put this to good use." The guy pulled out a portable camera and started a live broadcast. Meanwhile, the Reaper, running away from the boss, shouted that he didn't mean to summon monsters. "Let him run. He'll answer for his own actions." The protagonist remarked that even in such a situation, he was so loyal. He'd spent a fortune on a villa, so he'd happily kill this boss who'd come to him. By this time, the broadcast was gaining momentum and more viewers were joining. When an enraged mole tried to attack the Reaper, he swiftly stepped between them and repelled the attack. Meanwhile, Kui, watching the stream, remarked that dying at the hands of such a monster wasn't even shameful. No Yan from the Wrath Guild passed by, angrily exclaiming that everyone on the internet was talking about Grandmaster Yuan again, and it was driving him crazy. They just wouldn't stop praising him. His comrade replied that, speaking of skill, he was certain no one would overthrow their leader. The bald man smiled and said he'd watch the stream too. He approached him and remarked that, frankly, the God of Wrath only stood out due to his guild and class. But in terms of skill, no one could compare to a great master. But Yan responded angrily, asking him to repeat it. Kai asked with a smile, "He's from the Guild of Wrath, right? He's not the only one who thinks so." All the viewers in the comments praise him. Some say the God of Wrath, as the leader of the best guild, should have yielded to him long ago. Suddenly, the guy put a blade to his throat and asked, "Who is he?" The bald man wondered, what's the point of getting mad at him? Everyone keeps saying that. But let him understand, the God of Wrath is very humble. After all, when the heroes are gone, the villains will take over the world. But Yan asked, "That kid's streaming now, right?" He agreed and added that he was in the mine. The guy exclaimed, "Let them inform the guild. Everyone in the game, follow him." At this point, the main character delivered a few quick blows and declared the Reaper free to go. He was currently fighting only against him. The boss attempted to attack, but he instantly dodged and counterattacked with magic. Several magical bolts landed directly on the enraged mole. By this point, the stream had already attracted around 1,300 viewers. People in the comments started writing that they would study everything in detail. The way the Grandmaster moves is pure art. He controls monsters perfectly. He's so fast that after images are visible after his attacks. The Grandmaster is a true genius. The boss attempted another attack, but the MC summoned wolves, which immediately gnawed at his back. He noticed that he was focusing only on what was ahead and ignoring what was behind him. This would cost him dearly. He won't understand this, and he doesn't need to. The protagonist grabbed his sword and struck it right in the eye. The enraged mole yelped in pain when suddenly one of the summoned wolves struck him on the head with a hammer. The protagonist dealt the finishing blow and decided it was time to end this. A system window appeared, stating that he had killed the enraged mole and his level had risen to 15. He received equipment, a Stalker's Dagger and Dexterous Boots. Stalker's Dagger, weapon type, effect, plus 20 attack power, plus 5 attack speed, plus 25 agility. Additional skill, Stalker's Blade, activates after every 6th attack, strengthening the next attack and increasing attack speed by 10%. Agile Boots, equipment type, effect, plus 30 agility, plus 5 speed. Additional skill, Speed Boost, activates in non-combat mode, increasing speed by 10%. The Reaper excitedly asked if he was the legend who single-handedly captured the giant wolf. He should add him as a friend. If he supported him in the future, they would become invincible. The MC started to walk away and replied that he had approached the wrong person. The guy, perplexed, exclaimed that it was impossible. He had watched his video over and over again. He would recognize him even if he turned to ash. Suddenly, a fireball flew straight at his back. The protagonist instantly parried the attack and saw a crowd of adventurers in front of him. But Yan chuckled and said they would turn him to ash and see if he recognized him. Although, isn't that too much honor for such a fool? Another adventurer exclaimed, "What is he talking about? He's a great master. Come on." They'll start a stream and see what happens to those who disturb the Wrath Guild. They'll make them remember that their leader, the God of Wrath, is the strongest player in the Western sector. The protagonist, with a serious expression, wondered if they wanted to defeat him, to make a name for themselves. It looked like it was time for him to use the gear he'd been handed on a blue platter. A system window appeared, notifying him that he was surrounded by enemies. The counterattack had a 15-minute time limit. Kills after 15 minutes would not count as a sin. Suddenly, the Reaper pointed his staff at them and said that he'd been waiting for this for so long. He wanted to experience the thrill of fighting shoulder to shoulder with a comrade. Yes, he would thrive in this hellish carnage. He would protect those dear to him. The MC pushed him away, perplexed, wondering who he cared about so much. But Jan, with a sly smile, told him to listen. The protagonist swiftly slapped him across the face and asked, "What did he say?" The blow sent the guy flying into a rock. By this point, the stream had already attracted 5,630 viewers. All the commentators began to admire his skills, but Jan nervously said that he was just a stray dog who wouldn't be accepted by any guild, and he dared raise a hand against him? Did he really think he was a legend? Let them take him. Immediately after that, all the adventurers began to attack. One of them, holding a shield, shouted for everyone to follow his orders. Let all the warriors attack, and the mages and reapers stand behind and knock him out. The archers need to surround him. He doesn't believe he can handle them. MC activated the stealth skill and thought about how these idiots worked together. He'd deal with those behind him first. One of the adventurers missed with an attack and shouted that the idiot had disappeared. Let the mages quickly dispel his skill. Just as they were about to do so, the protagonist appeared behind them and pointed out that it was too late. After that, he immediately killed 2 mages and ran on. But Jan shouted that he was on his last legs. He'd just defeated the boss, so his mana and HP were low. There were more of them. Let them kill him. Viewers began writing that they'd never heard anyone describe a horde of people attacking one so gracefully. It was hard to say. The Wrath Guild was the best in the western sector. If their legend, the Great Master, could truly defeat them, the Wrath Guild would definitely be in trouble. But Jan exclaimed that if they succeeded, he'd give them as much money as the damage they dealt. There was no limit. MC began deftly parrying each attack and dodging the magical blasts, thought about how cramped this mine was, and he couldn't summon any more undead, but he should be able to destroy them all at once. The guild's mages used their magic to blow up the entrance to the mine. The protagonist abruptly ran deeper into the cave. But Jan shouted that the scoundrel was escaping. He was completely exhausted. Let them run after him. After a while, he himself went deeper and, grinning, remarked that he would catch him today. Suddenly, the protagonist landed on him from the ceiling, took him hostage, and held a blade to his throat. The boy cried out in fear. "Let the others help him, he's here." He replied that they wouldn't return. He had sent the first team to certain death. Didn't he think his master would blame him? Meanwhile, a group of adventurers, heading in the other direction, ran into a pack of summoned wolves, which instantly exploded. But Jan furiously screamed. What did he do? The MC finished him off and replied, "Let him ask them himself." After his murder, the livestream's viewers increased by a whopping 10,000. The slain adventurer dropped the artifact Dual Blades, Thirsty for Blood. Type, weapon, effect, plus 50 attack, plus 20 attack speed, plus 30 critical hit. Additional skill, Lifesteal, which converts 10% of damage into HP. The protagonist noted that this was an unexpected bonus. He would quickly gather everything and leave. Soon there would be a whole crowd of people here. After some time, he returned to the tavern and gave the ore to the blacksmith. Huoxian, surprised, said that he took it back. He was a tough nut. He hoped he would come back to them again, because he needed even more ore. A system window appeared, notifying that 100 points had been added to the blacksmith's positive attitude. The current relationship level was friends. MC thought that the blacksmith could gather 100 iron ore in a day, so it would take time. But this ore would last for a month. This time, he and a guild member gathered a lot of equipment. He'll sell it to Han Chin, and he'll get into trouble. So it's better to give it to individual players. It might be a bit more involved, but it'll be faster. He won't look for the first follower in the guild. Instead, he'll start with the clues. He remembers that one of the first follower's lackeys could control snakes in his past life. Maybe he should look for a hidden civilization of snakemen in the ditches. That should help him. After some time, the protagonist arrived in the sewers and realized that Officer Shatu had given him a quest to complete, requiring him to kill 30 rat souls. It's not difficult, but there's a hidden dungeon in the ditches. He attacked a rat monster and wondered if there was a snake demon's lair. In the hidden dungeon, he can find a grain of flesh and blood. It's a rare item that can increase attribute power. The hidden dungeon has a limited number of attempts per week. As soon as people find out about him, the whole town will come running. So he needs to summon the undead to close the entrance to the hidden dungeon beforehand. The room with the snakes is the hidden dungeon. He knows it's connected to the snakes in the gutters. After some time, the protagonist arrived at the right place. Suddenly, a powerful explosion of water was heard, and a level 60 king snake from the underworld slithered toward him. He worriedly wondered if this creature was also from the snake people civilization. How could it have such a high level? It would kill him in one blow. The protagonist activated the stealth skill and thought that he needed to avoid attacks, otherwise he would die and lose his level and all his equipment. But stealth was useless here. He would try to use everything around him. He began to try to escape the monster, but the snake persistently pursued him. MC tried to parry the blow, but failed, exclaiming that he couldn't block its attacks. He summoned a thunder scorpion and thought he needed to buy himself some time. He had to use magic against magic. He didn't believe he couldn't handle it. The snake was distracted by the scorpions, allowing him to escape. After that, the protagonist emerged and declared that even such a monster wouldn't frighten anyone here. After all, this was the Imperial Palace of the Western Desert, guarded by the Great Master, the protector of the realm. Any monster that tried to approach would be killed without exception. The snake-human civilization was at odds with the Western Desert Kingdom. The Western Desert Kingdom simply destroyed their civilization, and now some of its representatives crawl underground, seeking revenge. No matter what monster sets foot on royal soil, the Great Master, the protector of the realm, immediately destroys it. This snake is strong, but it's no match for the Great Master. Perhaps the snake demon's lair is near that monster. He'll follow it and maybe find something. But to prevent such situations, he needs to try his luck at the shop first. Maybe they have an elixir there that lures out weak snakes. This elixir will attract low-class monsters, and that way he'll avoid that huge monster. Sometime later, MC came to the city of Sandstorm in the Western Desert Kingdom and bought a snake-catching elixir that spreads a special scent that attracts weak snakes. Suddenly, the same Reaper, Chin Heng, called out to him and said that he was wandering all over Sandstorm just to find him. He hoped he was doing well. Let him add him as a friend. Does he know how hard it is to find him? But he knows. Their souls are connected. The protagonist asked if he had any business with him. The guy agreed and asked if he wasn't going to the monsters, to the Valley of Ash. He offered to go together. He replied no, he had other things to do. Chin Heng stopped him and shouted, "What do you think of this super trio?" He could join them. And so they, Leng Ye and Chin Heng, would become the Super Four. They would become each other's wings and save this sunken world. MC wondered, what is he talking about, Leng Ye? In his past life, he was the leader of the second most effective guild in Sandstorm, the leader of Reflection of Flowers and Moon. He was also a member of an order organization, and rumor has it he's one of the 9 chosen ones who created that very organization, so he could become the organization's leader or first follower. But tomorrow, the number of attempts to enter the dungeon would reset, and if he didn't go, he'd lose his profits. He'd better collect his reward first, and then contact Ling Yu. He accepted the friend request and said they'd go to the dungeon together next time. He really had things to do, so he'd go. The Reaper happily said he'd be waiting for his message. After some time, the protagonist arrived at the dungeon entrance and mused that, judging by his past life experience, snakes would appear right before the entrance to the hidden dungeon. He looked for traces of the giant snake. At that moment, smaller snakes appeared near his feet. He wondered if these snakes were real monsters in the serpent demon's lair, but he should be careful in case something unexpected happened. The protagonist destroyed the door and entered a hidden dungeon, the serpent demon's lair. A level 10 serpent demon larva appeared before him with 1000 HP, 100 attack, and 10 defense. Its skill was Clot of Flesh and Blood. The serpent demon larva absorbs grains of flesh and blood. This grants plus 50 HP. MC summoned a thunder scorpion to destroy the small snakes. After a successful battle, a system window appeared asking if he wished to consume a grain of flesh and blood. This increases the player's attribute level from 1 to 5. If consumed by a human, it increases their tolerance level. He consumed 1 grain and remarked, "Now that's the reward." A system window appeared, notifying him that he had gained plus 3 points to his intelligence. Tolerance level 1 out of 100. The protagonist thought that it seemed he could only eat this 100 times, but his attribute levels increased significantly. Moreover, such rare items that increase attribute levels are extremely rare. One can sell for 4 to 5 gold coins in the store. He could get thousands of them if he cleared the hidden dungeon once a week. This way, even if he didn't join a guild, he would always have plenty of gold. After this, the protagonist ate another 100 grains, significantly increasing his stats. He thought that was the maximum. He would save the remaining 900 grains, open a store, and sell them. From now on, he would clear this dungeon once a week. He would leave 3 summoned monsters there to scare regular players. So far, no one has found this place, but the snakes here are different from the ones he remembers. In other words, the snake demon can modify monsters? Where else would level 60 monsters come from? Suddenly, Lin Tan called him from the real world. MC, perplexed, wondered if something had happened. Otherwise, she wouldn't have called him. He answered the call and asked what was wrong. The girl replied that she simply wanted to ask if he had eaten yet. Surprised, the protagonist agreed. Suddenly, one of her classmates shouted into the phone that she wanted to ask if he was free to help clear the dungeon. He agreed and wondered, perplexed, was she asking him to help clear the dungeon? At that moment, Wang Yan from the Demon Blade mercenary squad approached her and mockingly said that he had already said that Lin Tan was lying. Her brother was just another braggart. Let everyone listen. How did this happen? He agreed without even asking what dungeon she was talking about. Had her brother gone crazy with the game? Are they misleading others together? They're like brother and sister. His friend pointed out that they were choosing the Valley of Ashes on heroic difficulty. No guild had ever cleared it. Lin Tan told the protagonist that they needed to clear the Valley of Ashes on heroic difficulty. Wang Yan, with a sly smile, exclaimed, Stop lying. Her brother spends all day playing, and she's a petty liar. It seems her parents aren't such good people to have such a terrible daughter. The protagonist told her not to waste her energy. He was going to the Valley of Ashes now.